31, yes, I would
Right,
suggest we
I'd like
do.
to call to order the Town Council work session for May the 26th. It is 3:31 p.m. Before we get started, welcome everybody that's watching us today. Appreciate you taking the time out to be with us. We are going to try something new this afternoon. We're going to try to take live public comment. I'll be giving more instruction later, but if there is something that happens during work session that you want to comment about it at the night meeting, or there is something just in general you want to comment like you normally would during public session, we will have instructions later. It'll go through the Q&A function. In the same time, you can still ask questions through the Q&A function during the meeting that either the staff or myself will answer it as we go along. So don't feel like you can't be heard if you don't want to zoom in. We get it. There will be a way to zoom in with a phone call too, and those instructions will be forthcoming before the 7 o'clock meeting. So with that being said, everybody is present. We're going to begin with a discussion with our underwriter on the parking structure and fiber financing, and we have Michael Lund with us, and he is our guy. So go right ahead. Or I don't know if Rick, you want to start it, or Brian.
No, I will, I'll just introduce Michael Lund. He's with Stifel. Stifel is the underwriter that we use on our COP. Basically, what we're trying to do right now is have Michael give a brief overview to the council on kind of what the industry is seeing currently today with the bond market and the COP market out there. Obviously, based on the pandemic issue that we're going through, it's been, everybody is in some kind of uncharted water that we haven't dealt with before. We did spend about an hour and a half this morning on a call with Moody's for our rating on this particular bond issuance. And so, Michael, why don't you kick it off and start talking a little bit about the market, and then also I think you have some documents, couple documents that you'll do a share screen here. I already see they're up, and you can talk about what those mean.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Rick. So just a kind of update on the municipal market. You know, the last time I was up there and met with you guys in early March, I believe that day was one of the days the stock market maybe was shut down because of a limit down. It had dropped so much, but in the municipal bond market at that time was equally volatile. And most of March was pretty rough in the municipal market, but there were some deals that started to get done. Since that time, it really has improved. We've seen a lot of liquidity come back. Actually, the last week was the first time, since March that we saw positive inflows for 4 weeks. And when I say positive inflows, that's money, investors putting more money into municipal bond funds than taking out. And so that's a great sign, because the more money that comes in, it means the more deals they look for, the more money there is to buy bond issues. So that was a great sign. But also, generally interest rates, all of March really, and even into early April, municipal markets the rates shot up quite a bit and diverged credit spread wise from the treasuries. And we'd seen several days where rates jumped up 50 to 100 basis points. So that's a 0.5% to 1% where they jump up in a day. But since that time, things have settled down. We've seen a lot of other deals starting to get done. Last week, actually, Stifel, out of our Denver office, we sold a sales and use tax bond issue, which is one of the first sales and use tax bond deals to be done. We sold that for the town of Superior. And so that actually went pretty well. But as you can imagine, a sales tax credit in this environment it was a bit of a challenge, but we had great demand for it, and actually pretty good interest rates. And then, as far as the kind of talking general rates, the municipal MMD, which is kind of like our index for the industry, the rates on the short end of our yield curve are actually back to where they were in early March, which were near all-time lows for that index. On the long end, we're about 40 basis points higher than where we back in early March. So again, the rates really have improved. They've come down, and we are back to near sort of all-time lows in the municipal marketplace. Now, having said that, on a caveat, it is credit specific. The rates I just referenced are for AAA water and sewer type deals, being one of the most essential services in investors' eyes. Credit spreads are still a little wider than they were back then. And so I think, one of the things as we go forward with this deal, this transaction, Breckenridge will be one of the first deals we've worked on in the Colorado mountain communities that is so heavily tourism dependent. But I think, the town staff and board, their history of all the reserves that you guys have set aside and how conservative you've been, I think that's a great story. So I think that will help us tremendously with the investors as we talk to them about this credit, because I think, what you guys have done in the past really buys you some time for things to recover. And we had a call with Moody's this morning, talking about this transaction, and that's one of the things they view very favorable about the town as well, is the reserve. So I think that really helps us overcome some of the credit spreads. So, having said, maybe we can just look at this first slide that's displayed. What this is our current estimated debt service for the parking structure COPs. And I want to point out, in the operating statement, you'll see a Series A and a Series B. The Series A is a taxable issue for the broadband, which we'll talk about in a second. The Series B is for the parking structure, and then also we are refunding. We've talked about this a little bit in the past. We're refunding the Town Series 2007 COPs, and so that will be included in the B, but it's not included in this debt service you're looking at here. We just isolated just the parking structure debt service because that's what we presented in March. I wanted to just kind of show apples to apples comparison. But if you look through the statistics at the top, one of the references we commonly use in our industry for sort of the all-in borrowing cost of your transaction is the TIC, or the true interest cost, which is the third number down on the right there at the top. And you'll see our estimated cost as of today is 2.713 is sort of the all-in cost estimate for this transaction. And I'm just going back to when I was up there last time, the true interest cost at that time was 2. So you can see we're not back to where we were, but we have come back substantially. We also, if you look kind of the numbers in the lower left, you'll see the principal and interest kind of running down. This transaction will go through 2040. But you see the debt service, the combined principal and interest, the third column over there. The total estimated annual principal and interest is about $2.35 million for this transaction. It's level debt service. It's fixed through maturity, so there's once we price, there's no more interest rate risk, no balloon or anything like that. Also, just for a little sensitivity, we did show what 25 basis points, 50 basis points, and 100 basis points. You see kind of what that impact would be on the debt service if rates jump up between now and when we can actually price the bonds. So maybe I'll pause there and see if there are any questions.
Yeah, Michael, what rating is Moody giving us?
We don't know yet. The town did receive a rating upgrade last year to AA2 from Moody's, and that wasn't in conjunction with any bond transaction. It was just sort of their periodic review. So, and that rating was on COPs. They knew about this issuance at the time. Having said that, like I said, we just had a call today, so it'll be about a week and a half before we get that rating.
It was, they're going to committee next Wednesday.
Yeah.
A week from tomorrow, they'll go to committee, and he thought they might have it the Thursday after, but as you can imagine, Moody's is working through different criteria themselves and trying to come up with criteria and how they're looking at markets and communities differently now, because they're dealing with this across the board, right, on everybody. So they're kind of trying to sort through what that criteria looks like. The one thing they did say was cash is king, meaning they look favorably upon those communities that still have a decent fund balance of cash available. So, yeah.
So Michael, to come up with a true interest cost as of, let's say today, 2.7, what did you assume our rating would be then?
Actually on this, we asked our desk conservative and we assumed a AA3, so one notch below. I'm not suggesting that they will downgrade, but I think we were just trying to be conservative with that approach. So.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. I mean, and they reference it on the phone. You're one of the first, highly dependent resort communities to come to the market. And so, but again, and like Rick said, cash is king. I think how you've managed the finances over the past several years has really set this issuance up well to succeed in this type of environment. I mean, there are other mountain communities in Colorado I would be very concerned about taking a COP now, but I think again, your cash is really going to be helpful in getting investors and Moody's comfortable.
Hey, Michael, a question was asked earlier. On these, the debt service, are these typically, do we set those up as just a single annual payment?
Yeah, so the way it'll be set up, and this is your current certificates of participation, you'll have interest payments twice a year. They're typically in June and December, so every 6 months. And then you'll have due just once a year, and that's typically in December, and that would be consistent with your other COPs. So you'd have 2 payments per year, 2 and 1 principal per year.
Okay.
Any other questions for Michael on this first part? No? All right, why don't you
Just
keep going?
to be clear, we don't know what the rate's going to be, Michael?
No, so what the process is so we need to get the rating first, and then we'll post a preliminary offering statement, which is what we use to market the issuance to investors. And in that case, it's an offering statement that we send to investors that explains the town. It'll have your financials and it'll talk about the projects. And that it's actually a document I think probably in your packet for today that'll be approved tonight. Once that gets posted, so we're hoping to post that in about 2 weeks. We like to use that to market the bonds for about a week and a half. And then we go out and we do a pricing. And so the day of pricing, which right now we're looking at sometime in mid-June, the day of pricing is when we actually go out, solicit bids from investors, and we actually lock the interest rates on that date.
But isn't, and this is not to Michael, this is to the team, don't we have, aren't we going to make a decision if we're going to do it tonight? And isn't that decision going to be predicated on the rates we're getting? So how can we make a decision if we don't know what we're paying for money?
Well, Jeffrey, I would argue that your decision won't be predicated on the rates. What we're doing is showing you a reasonable range of what those rates could be based on, what today's rate plus if it goes 25 or 50 basis points. I think a worst case scenario would be that it would jump 100, but 25 or 50, and then then you have to you look at that and go, is that acceptable? And so what I want to do is, because we're going to have an executive session later where you can get some legal advice from the town attorney relative to our lease and and issues related to the lease and your decision on this particular project. So just get whatever questions you have now, and we'll have an opportunity to kind of hear from Tim later with regards to what you were kind of leaning towards, I think.
Cool.
Yeah, and I'll before we go to the next slide, I'll maybe just add to that. One of the documents you guys will approve tonight, if you do approve it, the bond resolution, it sets out parameters. So if rates jump more than, I think we allowed about 130 basis points roughly, but if rates jump higher than that, the transaction can't go forward. We'd have to come back to the town for you guys to reapprove it. So it does have upper limit built into it.
We did 4% on the issue on the parking structure and 4.5% on the is the maximum ceiling on the taxable.
Any other questions? Okay. Continue.
All right, we can go to the second slide. The second slide is, looks like a duplication of the first one, but this is for the other series that I mentioned. This is specific to the broadband. So we just wanted to break it out so you get a sense of how much the annual debt service is for that project. You see it's about $480,000 a year. Keep in mind, this one is taxable. And so the interest rate on this, we're estimating is almost 3%. And so, the spreads are fairly tight right now between taxable and tax exempt. So you can see it is pretty compressed. That's why there's not a whole lot of difference. Also want to point out that the taxable is shorter. It only goes out to 2039.
Questions, anyone?
Yeah, I'm just curious, Rick, the financing that we are refinancing, what is the debt service on that small piece that we're rolling into?
So the two, I'll let Leslie chime in here if I get it wrong, but I figured you would ask this question. So the interest rate on the 2007, I believe, is 4.25. So it's not a great rate compared to today's rate. So we'll see. Obviously, that you can get a better rate. That's a reason for refinancing it. Plus, it frees up the property for us to use as part of the collateral on this big project right now. Does that answer what you were looking for?
Yeah, that's good enough.
Yeah. And if I could maybe add to that, Rick, I just pulled up the last numbers that we ran for the savings estimate on that. Right now, based on the numbers that you guys are seeing on your the slide there, just that TIC, the COP, it is shorter. It only goes out to 2027. But we estimate that you'll save about $30,000 per year through this refunding, which is a total future value savings of about $223,000, or just over $200,000 back to today's present value. So quite a bit of good savings there. It's not a very large transaction, but still, yes, substantial savings.
One of the things that you'll see also as part of the documents at some point, and I can't remember if it's actually, it may be in the emergency ordinance tonight. I've read so many lately. So on the parking structure, it's a 25-year term, but it actually, you're potentially tying up the property for 35 years. So 10 years beyond that. And that, the reason for that is if we fault on that, and we are basically giving them an additional 10 years to have control of our assets to try to recoup their cost. Is that correct, Michael?
Yep, that's exactly correct.
Yeah. So that's why you'll see it, two terms. You'll see the end of the actual lease, but then there's that other lease agreement which goes for 35 years versus the 25-year term. So.
And is that typical for this type transaction?
Yes, that's very typical. The old structures, the one we're refunding, actually, it's sort of an older dated structure where the town would have lost possession of the asset permanently, and a trustee for benefit of bondholders, as an example, it's town hall, they could take over and sell town hall. So this newer structure, the investors really don't want these assets. They're really buying based on the belief that the town will pay and doing a credit analysis. So that's why they don't take over the asset permanently, or they can't sell it, but they just have the right to use it. And since they only have the right to use it, we have to add that extra 10 years to try and recoup that. Yeah, like Rick said, that cost if the town were to default on the COPs.
Other questions?
okay, we secure a loan like this with hard property, correct?
Yes.
Is it
Correct.
any way that if we offered up more hard property, we'd get a better, a lower rate, or it's not how it's done?
No, it's not. And the investors really look to the quality. Sorry, my phone's ringing. Let me turn that off.
I was calling you.
They really look for the quality of those assets, and in this case, we're looking at town hall, the police building, rec center. So really, kind of stuff that's important to the town. So that's what investors weigh in on, not necessarily the value. There are some, laws, I guess, or rules that if you over collateralize, bond counsel gets uncomfortable with that. So, typically you try and match the value right up to around, a little more, a little less, but, kind of around the amount of the, what we're issuing.
And anything else? No? Okay, Michael. Next.
Michael, did you have anything else for the council, or?
Nope, that's it. I appreciate the time. I guess there's one question for you, Rick. I heard you at the beginning. You were going to give an update on Summit County. I might just hang out and listen to that just to make sure, because we want to make sure we disclose the most recent information in our offering statement. So I'll probably just put this on mute and listen in.
Yeah, that'll, so what Michael's referencing is related to, hotel motel versus short-term rental and the status of that. And so, I mean, that's not going to happen until, at the end of the meeting, Michael. So,
So I guess I do have a question. If the climate changes, like per hotel motel opening, not opening, that sort of thing, once we're locked in, are we locked in? I mean, can that change depending on the environment?
no.
COVID?
Once your rate is locked in, you are locked in.
And that's it.
They
Okay.
can't go back and go. I mean, if worst case scenario, let's say in, mid-June, we go, as Michael said, you go out, he puts them out for sale, they establish the rate, it gets locked in. We've done it. And then in August, we have a second wave and we shut down again. We're locked in. I mean, they can't go back and change the rate on us or anything. But what Michael has to be clear, and what we provide to them, is the latest information that we know it. They very much, a lot of time is spent on what's the status, what are we doing, how have we prepared, how have we done our tier 1 budget cuts, how did we do those, how have we positioned ourselves to absorb, the revenue losses that we expect today. I think they were very happy that we were able to absorb the majority of these revenue costs that we, actually we can absorb up to, on average, 55% total loss in 2020 revenues without touching our reserve accounts, our emergency reserve accounts. And so that, that's stuff that they like to see. In doing that, but it's all centered on that we provided them the best information. And I'll just tell you real quick, since he's on here, the debate over lodging is going on. The debate over lodging that's going on is this whole June 1 date, right? So obviously, we had put in for a variance, we were denied that variance, but the county has been hammering away at the state because they used some erroneous data and numbers that they were looking at, counting some cases that did not belong in Summit County. So as of 1:30 today, they had a meeting with the data people at the State Department of Public Health, and they sorted through and they have accepted the new data that was produced and set, and that obviously paints a different picture. So now they're resubmitting that variance request to the decision makers based on this new data. We still don't know that. But if we assume there's no variance, we already know restaurants can open tomorrow. So the variance really had nothing to do with restaurants. The other thing that comes into play is lodging. Right now at the state, hotel, motel can be open at the state. The only thing that's prohibited is short-term rental. In Summit County, we have prohibited all lodging, including hotel, motel, along with short-term rental. If we got the variance, we still weren't going to open prior to June 1st, but we were prepared to open all lodging, hotel, motel, short-term rental on June 1st with the variance. As it stands now, without the variance, we would open hotel, motel on June 1, and we have to wait for the governor's announcement on June 1st as to what he's going to do with short-term rental. We expect that if you follow the pattern from the governor, just like, you know, they announced restaurants basically yesterday, they came out with their thing. He did his press conference today at 1:30, but I didn't see it. But and then within 1 or 2 days later, whatever he announced takes effect. So if you follow that thing, if on June 1st he's going to lift short-term rentals, it may not come into play till June 3rd or June 4th, a couple of days after that, which is still 3 or 4 days later than we've been telling all of our short-term rental people that, you know, they can start renting again. But what we do know, and I heard directly from the county today, is that they will, on June 1, they expect they are going to allow hotel, motel, which doesn't help us other than Marriott Residence Inn, and second homeowners, which means if you're a interval ownership, a deeded owner of a week, and you want to use that property, you can for that week. You just can't put it back into the pool to be short-term rented. But if you're the deeded owner of that property for that particular week, you can use it in all of our timeshares in town. So that's where we're at right now with the lodging situation. So I think, you know, obviously more to come. Let's see what happens with this kind of new variance information. If we don't know something later today, I would expect tomorrow we will know something. That'll help us. Very probably worst case scenario, we're waiting until June 1 to see what the governor does statewide with short-term rentals. So.
And Rick, that June 1 is also all second homeowners, no
Yes.
restrictions, right?
Yes.
Currently, if you're a second homeowner and you have maintenance to do, you're allowed to come up, do maintenance, do what you need to do. And then starting June 1st, there is no restriction on your access in the county.
On June 1st, the second homeowner doesn't need to carry a paintbrush anymore.
Right, or a pipe wrench.
Yeah, or pipe wrench.
Have a pipe wrench in your back pocket. So. All right. Anything else for Michael or about that? All right, then. Let's get moving on to the rest of the agenda.
Hey, Eric, before you go, Michael, I think you can go ahead and leave the meeting if you want. I think we've got everything we need. So,
although
Okay.
I doubt you have anything better to do than this, really.
I can't go anywhere. So, all right. Well, I appreciate it, guys. And yeah, Rick will be in touch a little later.
all right, thank
Thanks,
you.
Michael.
Please, bye.
All right, we have planning commission decisions for the 19th of May. Anybody have any questions for staff on St. John's, the RMU or the Terbecke edition in Red Feather?
The only thing I will add, you do see a staff memo. If you recall, the code allows the the director the ability to approve Class A's, and the council said, please give us a report at the next meeting of what those Class A's are. This one's pretty easy because you guys have seen St. John's extensively, so you're familiar with the project. But that's, unless you have any other information, that is strictly an FYI for council that Class A was approved for St. John's.
Any questions on any planning matter for tonight? So no call-ups? All right. We move on to legislative, and our first piece tonight is an ordinance amending Chapter 1 of Title 9 of the Breckenridge Town Code known as the Town of Breckenridge Development Code by amending Policy 24 and Policy 24, absolute and relative concerning housing. Hi, Nicole.
Hi, Eric. That was a mouthful. Well, good afternoon, Mayor and Town Council. I'm here today to discuss the second reading of the ordinance to amend Chapter 1, Title 9, Policy 24 concerning housing. The purpose of this revision is to increase the inventory of affordable employee housing in a more fair and equitable way. And this revision, as proposed, has both relative and absolute requirements for housing based on an employee generation-based methodology. This methodology ensures that different use types are assessed based on their impact to the need of employee housing in our community. This policy, as proposed, both requires and incentivizes the private sector involvement in creating more housing opportunities. Regarding the memo, I wanted to direct you to Exhibit A. Rick sent out a minor revision to that equation or that example provided, and I just wanted to make note of what those revisions were. Under the example for a restaurant, the number 2,000 in the equation should be 4,149. The number 20.4 should be changed to 42.3. And additionally, the number 15 should be changed to 21 total employees to be housed. I'm here to really answer your questions and get your feedback, and I really appreciate your guys' time today.
Let's start with questions. Anyone?
Just to confirm, this applies to new development or change of use, correct?
Yes, a change in intensity of use. So if you were going from, for example, retail to restaurant, that would change the number of employees that are generated, and that would be assessed.
Or if you were going from one size of restaurant to a larger restaurant, right?
And then that additional square footage.
Additional square footage. Or if you're building a brand new restaurant, right?
Yes.
Making sure, just confirming I have all the.
No, I'm glad.
I think the other important part to point out here is that it does not apply to single family or duplex, correct? We had that discussion.
Correct.
We figured that the impact fee that they pay covers that. It does apply to multifamily residential townhome.
Yes.
And so if you have a restaurant and it actually changes to retail, which I'm sure this doesn't happen that often, but how is that calculated then?
You don't get anything back.
Okay.
It's just like we do with the parking and with water. That's just how it goes.
Yep. Okay.
And in
I have a question though for the council based on that question. So if it was an old restaurant that hadn't paid or was under the old mitigation and the new
Right.
retail would require some additional employee, they would have to pay that, right?
only if they went restaurant to restaurant.
Not restaurant to retail?
I don't think so. I mean,
I don't think so as written. I mean, Tim, you can chime in if you'd like, but I think you have to have an increase in the number of employees generated, and you would be decreasing the number of employees, even though they weren't subject to that code.
Yeah, I agree. That's the way it's written.
All right, thank you.
So just because I've said this before, I am not a fan of the 10% density bonus to help mitigate this. It is my feeling that if you're building a new building, you have to take care of the employees, and giving 10% density bonus is contrary, I think, to other things that we have done as a council to try to get our handle on density in the community. So I don't know how anybody else feels, but it's the same as I felt before. So
that seems to me like almost like double dipping. You're honoring your impact, and then what we're doing is we're giving you the ability to cause more impact.
What was the counter argument to that? I'm having a hard time remembering.
There's really two sides. Eric is making a good point, and then also that it incentivizes the on-site requirement. In the options for mitigation, we had some other. You can request off-site development. say your site isn't fit for on-site units. You know, there's really specific sites that would fit this kind of mold. And then there's also the option to do a development agreement. So really the purpose, and I guess two purposes. One was to incentivize, and two is right now under the code, there is a density bonus allowed for residential, which would include hotel and lodging. And so it would just be like restaurants and true commercial that wouldn't be able to access that.
Eric?
Yeah, go ahead.
I can appreciate what you're saying. I think another counterpoint might be we're getting net new. You know, when you buy existing housing and you deed restrict it, it's not necessarily net new. You may be buying housing that's already employee housing and just putting the deed restriction on it, which is valuable, but maybe not as valuable as net new. And then secondly is proximity. Typically, I mean, these are commercial buildings, so typically they're going to be in the commercial part of town. So I think walkability comes to play. So those would be a couple other benefits that I see.
I don't disagree with that, but you're requiring them to provide the housing. Some of them will choose, whether you give the bonus or not, to put it on site because it makes sense. Because just in the way they build the structure, so they're going to do it whether you give them the 10% or not. So say somebody comes in and they do a deal with the town to get a big chunk of land down, and we're going to let them build a grocery store. So, you know, just because they're going to house some employees there, we're going to give them, you know, another 3,000 square feet. I just don't think it's necessary.
I hear you, but I think it's a lot cheaper for them to, I mean, we've proven it with our buy down program. You know, I mean, it's a lot cheaper to do it that way than it is to build new. So that incentive is to encourage them to build new. So
sure, but the counter argument to the non-net new is non-net new also means new, no short term. So, you know, you're potentially having them buy stuff out of the STR pool, which we would like to sort of whittle down a little bit also. So.
Sure.
Anyone else have an opinion? Or how's it, or just on the general, I mean, this is a really, honestly, this is a small piece of this, and I'm not going to vote against it. Everybody is okay with this. That's fine. It just goes against my normal philosophy of free density, which I have been opposed to forever. But anything else in here anybody's having any heartburn with, or are we feeling pretty good about where we are with this code?
I'd like to find out, in just a straw poll, who else is uncomfortable with this, the 10% bonus?
Just the two of us, Jeffrey.
I just don't feel strongly either way. I see both sides, and we've talked about the 10% bonus in residential as well, though. Did we make a change to that, or is that still available?
That's still in the code. It was commercial that was removed.
I'd like to get rid of that too, but.
I'm leaning against, even though, Eric, that your argument was very compelling for a new grocery store with an extra 10% density. That sounds great to me. But with that example aside, I do agree with the short-term rental that I think first and foremost, it would be great to convert short-term rentals to long-term.
Well, that'd be a reason for not giving 10%, because then.
Yeah, that's why I'm on that side. Aside from your example, which would be a reason to do it,
gotcha.
I'm for the no 10%.
See, I'm envisioning that it's going to be a challenge on a lot of projects that we may see going forward over the years for someone to provide 25% housing on site. And so when somebody raises their hand and says, hey, guys, I can't do that, regardless of bonus or not, I'm just setting that aside, because who makes that decision?
Right now, planning.
Who makes the decision that says, okay, you're right, we agree with you, therefore, as long as we get 35% in the upper blue, you're okay? Is that
Right
town
now,
council or is that staff?
that's planning commission, I believe, because they would do a fit test for whether or not the additional, say there was an additional density. One, does the additional density fit within our code requirements? Is it too much? Is it too much? And then two, they would say, you're right, this doesn't fit. So that's when we would implement. You can do, maybe it's less on site. Maybe there's a 10% on site, or maybe it's okay. We don't think the site is fit for any employee housing at all, and we would have it be 100% off-site mitigation. And then in the conservation district, it would be 100% would be off-site mitigation, unless they say they had a basement and they chose to do it there.
See, I think they're either going to be able to fit the 25% on, or they're not. And so I'll fall with the majority of the group, but I'm just as happy to drop the density bonus, because I'm not really sure that makes somebody be able to accomplish something that they otherwise couldn't have accomplished. I don't know. So sort of like Kelly, I'll roll with the gang.
Yeah, but the gang is on the fence right now, so somebody's got to commit.
I think, well, I had a different view than Eric. I am absolutely not on the fence on this ordinance. I think the ordinance as a whole is a very important ordinance. I mean, I would prefer to see the 10%, but that's not going to compel me to vote no. So.
Yeah. Oh, no. I think we all agree.
Yeah, that's same for me.
We want to pass the ordinance. So do we need to take a vote, a straw vote, Rick, to make it clear?
Well, I think you need to give us direction so that when we present it tonight, we probably won't have an amended version ready, would you, Tim? Or we would just amend it with the exclude, or we would verbally exclude that and pass it, and then.
You're on mute, Tim.
I don't think that we have enough time to actually prepare a new version of the ordinance, but we can give the council some language to delete certain phrases and certain, page and line, and then we can prepare the final ordinance after it's adopted on second reading.
Right.
Is there a compromise where the 10% could be used only toward building employee housing?
That's how it's written right now.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. No worries. It's sometimes hard to pull that out, but yeah, the 10% could only be used for employee housing. So if someone was required to house, one employee on site, they wouldn't necessarily say they were a low generating use like office. They wouldn't, that just because they could get more density based on the 10% of what they could build, that doesn't mean that they can use it all, because unless they build more housing on site than what they're required to do.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
So is there an opportunity here to pass it as is tonight, but gather a little more information? I feel like maybe changing it for tonight feels a little rushed, but it's not that I don't want to look at this as an option, but I guess I just don't want, I don't know, I'd like to see, the pros, cons in writing rather than just tossing them out here.
We're on second reading, right?
Yeah, we're on second reading. I'm not,
Okay.
I think, I get what
forgot that,
Kelly's
yeah.
saying. It's really in a nutshell what the pros and cons are, right? On one half, Eric's saying, why are we incentivizing people for doing what, we have to do? If you could almost put it in the context of, policy 33R that you're going to address later, we've taken a lot of, now that it's part of the code that you have to do these things, you no longer get incentivized or positive points for doing it. And so, now we're creating a new standard for employee mitigation based on construction. So why are we incentivizing and giving somebody additional square footage? That's, you know, that's certainly part of Eric's argument, and we're just allowing things to be bigger. And on the, you know, and if you look at the, you know, the example that was in your packet, it shows what that, you know, if you take that 4,000 square foot restaurant and or construction project and what it yields without density versus what it yields with the density bonus. And what was that number? Was it different employee yield?
Yes. So basically requiring the on-site mitigation. So say someone has a 4,000 square foot restaurant, and requiring that on-site would adjust the amount of restaurant space, which would ultimately adjust the number of employees that they're generating. So you kind of have to work down from, okay, at the max, it's this, but that means they have to generate this on site. And you kind of work to a point where it gets around 24% of their square footage would be required to be employee housing for that use. So we kind of did a few examples like that. So I think by use type, a certain amount of the square footage will be housing. And we can kind of look into that more as we apply this to different projects. But the number difference was, you know, 554 square feet. And there's still, they still ate into the density existing square footage. So it just reduces the amount of profitable square feet.
Yeah. And I think, you know, Gary made a great point earlier, you know, somebody's ability to build on site where they're doing development, you know, how much of that is really going to be dictated by whether it's worth the 10% extra density related to what they're going to do anyways. And so to answer your question, Kelly, yes, we could pass this on second reading. You always have the ability to go back and amend an ordinance later or a code later, if that's what you choose to do. I would want to see how many people need more information or how many people are ready to make some decision this evening about it. Because I saw 3 or 4 of you that said you could go either way. So
Eric?
Well, not now that I'm married, no.
Tim.
Eric, I also wanted to point out, and kind of in response to Kelly's question, is that this town is currently has engaged a consultant to update our housing analysis. And it's a difficult project given the current environment and the impact of the coronavirus pandemic on employee generation, but we're going to still get the report updated. And when that is done, there's a very strong likelihood that the ordinance may need to be changed to reflect the new study. It's a long way of telling Kelly that it's likely that the ordinance will come back for your reconsideration at some point in the future.
There you go.
Thanks, Tim.
So based on all of that, who, if we could just see by a raising of hands, who would be supportive of deleting the section that allows for a 10% bonus density? 1, 2, 3, 4. So you have a majority.
All right.
So
we'll work on the language for the motion then.
Okay. Thank you, Tim. All right. Water system maintenance fee amendment.
This one is me. This ordinance comes on for second reading. It does amend the town's water system maintenance fee as indicated in the ordinance. And as you'll remember, James Phelps gave you a nice analysis of this ordinance 2 weeks ago. There are no changes to the ordinance from first reading.
Any questions? Anyone? All right. Next, we have the overhead walkway lighting second reading. Julia?
Thank you. This ordinance is before you at second reading this evening, and it is going to amend Chapter 12 of the exterior lighting policies in the town code. We did make some changes from first reading based on council's feedback at the last meeting. Previously, we had proposed it at publicly owned, and council would like to have that removed, so we will remove that. I want to point out that the version you have in the packet needs a couple of tweaks to it, including publicly owned, and also, which we can do for this evening if you'd like, or we can continue this. Also, we wanted to add safety into the definition, and that's missing out of what's in your packet this evening too. So we will remove publicly owned and add in safety for the walkway lighting for pedestrian use. We did add in LEDs as required for the overhead walkway lighting. And one of the concerns was that this could potentially then, opening it to private walkways as well, become too overwhelming. We do have Kelvin and lumen limitations, which haven't changed since first reading. However, we did add in the Class D minor permit requirement, which will allow staff to review those private applications and make sure that they meet the lumens and kelvins on private property. We also proposed 32-foot width maximum so that the areas wouldn't get too large that could be lit. And we did provide some measurements since that first reading in here for your feedback, gave you a range of what's out there and some photos as well for your feedback. The 32 was sort of based on the width of Main Street Station's entrance area. And then as their plaza expands, you know, it wouldn't be allowed in the larger plaza area. But there's some measurements across some different areas of town just to give you some examples and see if you're comfortable with that 32 feet. So if you're comfortable with this evening, you would just bring back this ordinance with modifications to include the removal of publicly owned to allow for private, and then we'd add in the safety for pedestrians as the purpose for this overhead walkway lighting.
Questions, anyone? Dick?
Yeah, I don't know if it's a question or a concern. I have concerns about the private. I look at this list and it's like, wow, we're lighting up a lot of stuff. I feel like it's gonna go a little too far. It's gonna get too busy. So I have concerns there.
I kind of felt the same. I just wondered if there was any way that we could determine the like overall glow of town and whether that was going to be, you know, whether it would be noticeable. I mean, if we're comparing during Christmas when everybody has lights up, you know, to this list, I just am sort of wondering if we have any idea how that would compare. Or
I don't have any idea. I'm not sure who would take advantage of this. You know, I have heard from Jack Wolf. I do think that Main Street Station would take advantage of this. And during the winter, the decorative lights, sort of those holiday lights, are allowed during the ski season. And then, see, I think it's starting May 1st through the start of the ski season, to the start of the ski season, then bistro lights are allowed outside at restaurant locations, outdoor dining. So that's sort of, this is a third new category. I don't really have a good idea of who would be taking advantage of it, what the impact will be on involving private property.
Close to half this list is all Main Street Station. I wonder if there's a way that we can limit, you know, per owner or per, I mean, Main Street Station is all owned by one entity, right? One group. So what if we said that you can put it up, but it's just one per owner?
Don't forget, two of the things on this list don't qualify because they're over the 32 feet. So the bold outdoor
Right.
Doesn't qualify, and neither does the bold south wall to simply massage. Those are over the 32 feet, so they're not.
Right.
That's correct. And Aaron, this isn't an inclusive list, so it doesn't include all the areas that could happen. We just wanted to give you some ranges that you might be familiar with. There's likely more locations than what's on this list that could potentially take advantage of this. Our original proposal was for public areas only, and it was sort of based on the parking structure to Main Street. Sort of, people have to walk between Town Hall and the Breck Professional Building. And if council is, more comfortable with just trying out the public piece at this time, we can come back with some revisions at the next meeting as well.
I would like to do just that. I would like to approve this as a public safety type issue, and then go down the road and think later on about people that might want to do it for commerce. So I don't know how other people feel, but I always thought from the inception this is more about public right of ways, not private egress.
I think the thing we got to at the last meeting was more about going from public to public over private also. So like Lacima from the parking lot to the street and lighting up that corridor was sort of the poster child, not walking in somewhere that's a dead end.
And I would agree. And I think that this is, even if it is private, like even if it is walking through Main Street Station, I do think that is safety. I do think that, and it's safety, but it's also encouraging people to walk. I think right now people, when they come from out of town, don't know whether it's safe to walk through town or not. And it can be a little bit dark in some areas. And so I would argue that even though it is over private, it can be a safety issue as well.
But we can easily start it just private and, see how that looks once we get the parking structure done. Or
you say just public, you mean?
Yeah.
Or private?
Just public.
Okay,
and then, maybe the staff can look at a couple other places where it might be legitimate, there might be some legitimate concern.
I'm with Jeffrey on that one. I think that's the way to go because, these are large areas that we're talking, and we can see how it looks and works with the parking structure. And remember, bistro lighting is legal during the summer, so people can put it up in the summer. This is just a year-round use. So,
but only over dining areas.
Oh, that's true.
So if you just have a breezeway,
gotcha.
You can't use it.
But I'm still, let's start with public and see what we think, and then we can expand is my vote.
How's everybody else feel about that?
Yeah.
I agree.
Dennis?
Dennis, you're on mute.
Mute, Dennis. Dennis, you're on mute.
Thank you, Eric. I like the idea of going with public.
Okay.
And then we see how it looks. We can make a decision from there.
Fair enough. Kelly, you're good? Aaron?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll continue it this evening, and we'll make the revisions for the following meeting.
Or can you do a verbal amendment, Tim?
Yeah, it's sort of like what we're going to do on the housing ordinance. We can give the council suggested language for a motion that would do what you want to do, and then we can finalize the form of the ordinance after tonight's meeting.
Well,
there's no rush for this.
I'm sorry?
There's no rush for this. We could just continue it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of course, the ordinance left the word public in there already, so
Yeah.
it's already written about the way you want it.
Oh, yeah. I don't
Pretty
even know what
much.
the change would be.
Well, Julia had mentioned adding the word safety, but Julia, can we figure out how to insert that between now and tonight?
Definitely, I can send it over to you.
Okay.
Excellent.
With the council's permission, and we'll leave the bulk of the ordinance as drafted, and we'll come up with some additional edits with respect to safety, and maybe be ready to adopt the ordinance tonight on second reading with Julia's amendment language.
Perfect. Sounds good. Noise ordinance amendment for second reading.
This is me. This ordinance, if adopted, would decriminalize a violation of the town's noise ordinance, which means you would not be subject to imprisonment if you violate the noise ordinance. You'll remember that this suggested amendment was made by the municipal judge last time he was in front of you. He suggested that changing it from a penal ordinance to what we call a civil infraction would be a better way and a more efficient way of enforcing the ordinance. If it is a civil infraction, the only punishment is a fine, no jail time. There's also a benefit from the town's perspective in that there is no entitlement to a jury trial on a civil infraction like there is on a penal ordinance. We think that it will be an effective way to enforce the noise ordinance going forward, and there are no changes to this ordinance from first reading.
All right, any questions, anyone? Nope, easy one. Emergency ordinance. No, ordinance to amend public notice requirements for town projects. Second reading also.
This is me also. You'll remember that this ordinance changes the process on how council will deal with the town project to require that notice of the public hearing be given when the matter is in front of the planning commission, and that notice of the council's actual decision time, in other words, when you're going to make the final decision on a town project, would also require public notice. The notice will be in the same way, will be given in the same way that the planning commission gives notice of a Class A application, which is notice to persons within 300 feet of this project site. I think council directed this ordinance. Staff is comfortable with it, and there are no changes from first reading.
Questions?
No.
No? All right, great. Thanks, Tim. We have emergency ordinance to approve COP funding.
That's Rick.
Yeah, I'm gonna attempt to kick this off, and Tim will undoubtedly jump in here. Tim wrote a great email, a great memo to you all, very detailed memorandum, specifically for the purpose of any new council that are not familiar with how a certificate of participation and what it entails. And really it's based around the word participation, right? Because we're entering into a relationship with a series of investors that are basically, we're leasing them the ownership of a control of a property that we're putting up for collateral, and in turn they're leasing back that property to us, which is part of why we issue a payment to them to allow us to use that property, because that's why they're making their money off of that. They really don't want our property, and that's a certificate of participation and how it works. So obviously, in order for us to go in and arrange this type of a financial situation, we're required to have council approval. We've done these as emergency ordinance in the past, and we're bringing you this one as an emergency ordinance because it's critical that we have a reduced time period that we're dealing with in order to take advantage of interest rate markets and not have to wait that 60+ days in order to go out and do this if we used a 2 reading process. So that's what this this emergency ordinance is, and it's basically for two projects, 2020A and 2020B. 2020A issuance would be the broadband, which is a $7 million COP. It's a taxable COP. 2020B will be the tax exempt COP for the $41 million for the parking structure, plus $1.8 million for the refi of an older COP, a 2007 COP, which I believe, was that a TLC, the Learning Center? Oh, I think it was.
Even remember at this point.
Yeah. Let's see, what else do we need to say, Tim, on this particular?
Well, I want to point out that with respect to the 2020B issuance that includes funds for the structure, we're coming up upon a deadline in the ground lease, which provides that the council has to approve the project financing for the structure work not later than July 1 of this year. And that's another reason why we are proposing an emergency ordinance in addition to wanting to move rapidly. We don't want to get into a situation where if we went to a second reading of the ordinance in June and the ordinance was adopted as a non-emergency ordinance, it would not become effective until 35 days after second reading, which would extend us, I believe, past the July 1 deadline. So we do believe there is certainly a legitimate reason and need to do this as an emergency ordinance. With respect to the ordinance itself, it was written by bond counsel, which means bond counsel can understand it. It is very technical, but it does reflect the financing arrangements, as Michael Lund explained earlier today. The two issuances, the 2020A, the taxable, and 2020B, the non-taxable. You might be asking why the A series are taxable and the B are not. The town has an arrangement with Allo, which the bond counsel determined precluded the issuance for the broadband being tax exempt. So they said if we're going to do the broadband, we have to do it taxable, which is not a major deal, although as you've learned, taxables have a little higher interest rate yield to anticipate the taxes to be paid. Other than that, I hope the memo was useful, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
That was an excellent memo, Tim. Really.
Yeah.
Anybody have any questions? Anything Jeffrey can answer for anybody?
Anyone?
All right, everybody good with this for this evening? Very good.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks for all that, Tim. That was really good. We have policy 33R, energy conservation for first reading.
Council, I'm not able to access my video for some reason, but I am here.
Hi, Mark.
So 33R, the energy conservation amendments, we brought to you back in a couple weeks ago, and the proposal in front of you is very similar to that. The one thing we've refined is we have come up with a point assignment for outdoor heated hot tubs and pools in 500 square foot increments. There's one negative point associated with that. Other than that, the ordinance is pretty much as you saw it in draft form a couple weeks ago. I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Questions? Everybody good with this for first reading?
Yes.
All right. Excellent. Thank you, Mark. We have an amenity club policy for first reading.
Great. Okay, there I am. I'm on video now. Yay. Okay, amenity clubs. We brought you this also a couple weeks ago. We called it club memberships. We've defined it as an amenity club because it uses amenity space typically. And And we brought it to you as was proposed a couple of weeks ago, which was actually to prohibit those in all land use districts within the town. So here to answer any questions or take any suggestions you have on this.
So I had some discussions, thoughts, and a discussion with Rick today about, and with Dick Carlton. And one of the reasons, if you'll recall, that sort of a cursory reason that I thought we should just ban them outright was because right now staff has enough stuff on their plate rather than digging through and trying to come up with a new set of rules for these amenity clubs. You know, I thought the best thing to do would just be ban them outright. After some further discussion and consideration, I wonder if what we should do is place a moratorium on them and then take some feedback from the development community that is interested in these and come back to it when time allows. My real concern is that in the current environment, I think it would be very easy to have some current development decide that a great way to generate some cash would be to sell parking in places that they're already underparked, and that concerns me. So if we would just have a moratorium on these, and then we can look at it in depth, I think that would be a great way to go.
I have a question. Is this, and this is really for anyone, have we put a prohibition on anything, complete prohibition on anything besides strip clubs?
We do not have a prohibition on strip clubs. We have an area where they have to go. We do have a moratorium on marijuana sales at the moment. So we have a moratorium that limits the amount we have. I would argue this would almost be the same thing because we already have amenity clubs. They are already grandfathered in certain places like Gravity House, and you know, some of the BGV properties have a similar kind of context. So I don't think we would be doing anything out of the ordinary unless Tim disagrees with me, which would mean I'm wrong.
And perhaps just to add a little bit to what Eric just said, it was about a year ago or so, we put a moratorium in place in the historic district for a few months until we resolved some issues we were having with additions there and revising our standards, as many of you will remember being on council at that time. So it was in place it ended up being actually less than 6 months, but so we do have precedents for doing this before, Dennis, for short durations.
Got it. Thanks, Mark.
Actually, Dennis, I think that we've done 2 or 3 moratoria like what Eric is talking about. You know, one of the things that's unique about the town's land use system is the flexible zoning theory is basically you can build anything anywhere if you can mitigate the impacts. And we try to measure the mitigation of the impacts through the absolute and relative policies in the development code. One of the problems that the amenity club issue raises is trying to understand exactly what the problem is and to the extent that a developer could actually mitigate it. And so I personally think Eric's suggestion is a good one, to do a relatively short moratoria, 6 months, say, to give the staff time to, you know, more calmly and analytically see where we should go with this, and then to come back to council with a report. Ultimately, it's going to be up to council what to do, if anything, with amenity clubs. But I think it just feels right now that we're rushing a tad.
Just for everybody in the audience that doesn't really know what we're talking about, this sort of came to light with the Peak 8 Hotel, and the owner of the hotel that hasn't been built yet was suggesting that they would have parking for the people that stayed in the hotel, but then they would also sell a membership component that you didn't have to have any ownership in the hotel itself, but you could then you could pay to use parking, locker room, swimming pool at any time you want. Of course, that creates a traffic parking impact to the community that hasn't really been thought through. And that's one of the reasons that we're talking about this, that, you know, so that if there is any current properties like this where a property owner could then just sell parking without discussing the impacts of bringing more people to that property without paying for the parking, that's really where this is going. So
Yeah. And just to add to that, I mean, well said, Eric. They're also using additional amenity space that really it's being used for commercial purpose, and it was free density because our amenity space does not require commercial density. So, I mean, that was another thing that I wanted to explore is you know, if you're going to use density for a commercial purpose, then you should use commercial density and not bonus density that the town has given you, which we do for amenities appropriately. So, yeah, Eric, I think it's a great approach. You know, I think the lone or one of two votes against last time, and it was really because I wanted to go through this process. And you're absolutely correct. Staff has way too much on the plate. We've been trying to do an awfully lot, you know, here in the last couple months, and you know, let's slow it down. Let's do a moratorium so just what you're concerned with won't happen, and let's slow it down. And as Tim said, take a more analytical approach and really try to, without banning it, let's leave the door open and the opportunities there for the creative things that may come down the road. And let's see if we can figure out how to in a fair way, in collaboration with the development community, put something together to mitigate the impacts.
thanks, Dick. How's everybody else feel about this?
With you guys, yeah.
I agree with everything that's been said. It wasn't sitting right with me before, and I think what the Planning Commission had said too about when you ban something, you can have loopholes, and I'd much rather go the commercial route and change the density for it. Also, I would ask staff to not just look at what's going on right now, but looking at, you know, what's developing in the future too, because I think this membership concept could really evolve. And so make sure that we're preparing for that, and to look at what numbers really exist with the memberships that we have so far, how much it's getting used, and that sort of thing.
I'm supportive, Eric, as well, but of a moratorium, so we can explore all the possibilities.
Kelly?
Are we looking at a time limit for the moratorium? Are we saying a year?
6 months is what.
6 months?
6
Okay.
months is what has been proposed, Aaron.
Okay, great.
So we basically asked Tim Berry to have one drafted for tonight in case you guys decided to do this. So what we will do is we'll amend at the start of the regular meeting, we'll amend the agenda to remove this and replace it with, it's an emergency ordinance, right? Creating a moratorium, Tim?
Yes.
So
We need to figure out some way to get the draft moratorium ordinance to council. So you'll have it in front of you tonight, and also to get it on the website for the public.
And you have a copy of it, correct?
I do. I can email it to council.
Shannon has it.
So Shannon, she's going to do that now.
Can you also, in addition to emailing it to council, can you and Helen figure out a way to put it on as an agenda or something so that the public could review it?
We'll work on it and see what we can do.
All right, thank you, everyone. The final bit of legislation is Walkable Main Street as a resolution.
All right, so Mayor and Council, the purpose of this resolution is to allow for the temporary closure of Main Street to create a walkable pedestrian area during the summer. In addition, it gives the town manager the ability to allow certain businesses to expand operation onto the roadway, and allows him also the ability with your guidance to set the timeframe and boundaries of the closure.
So is this assuming we're gonna close the entire Main Street?
I can speak to what has been discussed, or maybe Rick and Shannon want to do that. It's 200 block of North Main through the 400 block of South Main, beginning June 12th and lasting approximately 8 weeks.
And Helen or Rick and Shannon, that allows for east-west traffic on Lincoln and Adams, or Lincoln, Washington, and Jefferson. Is that what I understand?
Not Jefferson, or not Washington, that would
Not
be
Washington, I
closed.
misspoke. Jefferson. Yeah.
Adams. So really Adams and Ski Hill, Lincoln, and then Jefferson would be open so that we could allow deliveries and trash hauling to go straight through.
Other questions? No? All right.
Wait, I have one. Did we ever entertain doing it on a smaller area to test the waters, or do you think that's just?
Let me weigh in here. We're gonna have a walkable Main Street discussion at the end of our work session here. So I think that regardless of whether we did it smaller, regardless of whether we did it at all, this also still, grants us certain abilities to work with businesses. This does not, because we have this ordinance, doesn't mean that we're, whether you pass it, that we have to close down this part of Main Street. One of the things it does is gives me the ability to enter into agreements with businesses that may want to use some town property, town right away for an expansion of property, whether it's in the closed area or not. I believe it also allows for some of that stuff. So we need, we plan on having a very thorough discussion with you here in probably 30 minutes or so on kind of the status of where we're at and how we should continue with the whole potential walkable Main Street concept. So you can just, based on what happens there, you can decide how you want to approach this tonight. So, yeah.
Does that sound all right?
Yep.
Hey, does anybody need a 5-minute break like I do?
Yeah.
Or take a quick 5? Is that legit?
Just everybody leave logged in, or just shut down your video, or just leave it on, but we'll come back in 5 minutes.
What about? I want a 5-minute break. Yeah, but not that I'm gonna.
Are we back on? All right, we are back with work session and we move on to public projects update.
Okay, the first up is the public projects memo, which included an update from the water treatment plant project as well. I don't have anything to add, but I'm happy to take questions.
Anything?
So Shannon, the fiber project, how much longer, how long will that go into the summer this year?
Depending on the finance that's approved, will continue on till early fall.
Okay.
And what about the energy company? What's it called?
Excel.
Excel. Are they going to be done in my lifetime?
No.
I'm sure they should be finishing up in the next couple weeks on Wellington, and hopefully we won't see them again for a while.
I think the sign on Wellington says June 19th, which I think is also great that it says Excel Energy Work, you know, and then the dates that it's happening. It's great that it could also say not the town.
It's funny, I actually haven't seen any work happen there yet. I don't know if anyone else has, but the sign's been up for a week.
Got to ease into it.
Hey, the pipe is laying on the side of the road.
Right, I did see that.
There you go.
But I think the crew that is working for Excel is actually down farther west on Wellington, down closer to like French Street area, right, Shannon?
I haven't seen them this week. They were out saw cutting on Wellington up by the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And then they'll come back and start digging, but I don't know where they were today, Rick.
Yeah, I passed them. They were farther to the west.
Okay.
All right, P&T.
Yeah, let me kind of kick this off. It starts off in there. You have basically a memo from Shannon Smith reminding you of the GMP that we had on the parking structure. And also our need to give a notice to proceed. So basically what we can address this later, but what I'll be asking the council for, if we adopt the funding, the emergency ordinance for the funding, is that you're at that same point giving us a notice to proceed with the continuation of the fiber construction. Because you recall we had a window of money to spend until we decided if we were going to do the full $7 million COP. We've kind of come to the end of that. So, as we continue on with that and they do additional work, that's going to be cutting into that $7 million number that we're financing. And also we have to do a notice to proceed with the contractor if we expect to stay on schedule and meet our deadlines for the parking structure. So we can talk about that later, but that's a reminder of what those numbers are in that memo. The other thing I want to get council head nods on is our plan to start our free ride transit system on Monday, June 1st. So we expect, the county, they were going to amend their public health order. Did that one already come out, Eric, that allowed for free ride? If it didn't, it's getting ready to come out. But we'll be allowed to operate our free ride system. Our plan is to do it June 1st on a limited summer schedule that could run throughout the summer for us. So basically what we would be proposing is a four bus system. So that's 2 buses on the gray route. The gray route is a combination of the yellow and the brown. So it runs from a CMC all the way to the ice rink. It takes about 45 minutes to do that loop. So that's why we have 2 buses on there, so that we can maintain 30-minute on a 30-minute schedule on that. Then it also has the black route and the purple route. I'm trying to remember this without looking at it. Is that right? And then, so that's your 4 buses. We have in the budget, we have money for a 5th bus, which was going to be the trolley. And, you know, if we end up shutting down Main Street, we have to think about what that looks like. There's a couple of options, and we've been talking about that with staff. We could run what we might consider kind of an express route from the, from the airport lots that would touch downtown and then also go to the ice rink. And so we would try to run that every 30 minutes also. Maybe we could do it in 20 minutes if we're not making all the stops in between, but it's strictly an express route. Another option would be just to throw a 3rd bus on that gray route, which would cut it down to 20 minutes. Our feeling, while that may make some sense, our feeling is those people, if we start pushing our guests out to the airport lot, those guests are going to look for it, an efficient and fast service to get downtown. And having them stop at every stop and take 30 minutes to get there wouldn't be a great guest experience. And even if we have pushed more employees out there, I think they would rather see more of an express route dropping them off in the downtown area. And then, from either direction, whether it's the ice rink or that. So if council wants to decide on that 5th route today, we certainly can, or we can be very flexible. And I think within a few days' notice, we could kick off that 5th route once we start to get a feel for what parking looks like, level of people in town, et cetera, which would probably be my recommendation is, hey, even if we wait a week and kind of reevaluate it based on what we see, that's a week that we're not paying for that 5th route that 5th bus we may not need June 1, actually, so.
Do we think it might be wishful thinking that people will be forced to park outside of town? I mean, do you think we're going to come back with such a vengeance that parking could be an issue?
Yes.
Really? Okay. Let's hope so, huh?
You've been on Main Street the last couple of weekends. There's people here.
Okay. Well, okay.
I have a couple of questions. First, have we heard anything from the Summit Stage and how it's been running and any issues they've come across in this new world?
We gave you a report at your last meeting that talked about those the numbers on their limited route. It's my understanding, and Jen's on here, it's my understanding they're adding 10 or 20% capacity now and moving up their routes, right?
Yeah, so, well, hello, Town Council and Mayor. So far so good with the stage. Their ridership has been increasing with the service that they've provided. It's still very limited at this point, but it seems like there are riders. They still have that 10-person limit, which makes it difficult.
And with, I feel like it's important to enforce the mask ordinance on the buses. Are our drivers prepared for, and I keep on hearing and seeing conflict around masks. And I just want to make sure that we're setting up our drivers in this program to succeed. Are the drivers prepared to enforce that?
We do have a process in place right now, just based on some of the feedback from the stage. They've had a handful of people who did not want to wear a mask, and their process is to call a supervisor comes and diffuses that situation. And so far, so good with that. Talking to Rick and Shannon earlier today, we would coordinate with our local PD and just to see what kind of process they would recommend. In that memo, that second page, we do have some safety protocols that we would want to continue. And so mask wearing for our riders and our drivers. And we do want to have the policy of no mask, no ride, at least at this point, based on the health order. So I feel like we're in a good position that we can handle that.
Okay, great. And thank you. And I think especially if people are parking on Airport Road, if this is their first interaction with people coming to town, I think that could really encourage or set the stage for their experience in Breckenridge. So I think it's really important. And thank you so much, Jennifer, for everything that you put together here.
if people are parking at Airport Road, are we gonna have like a sign at the kiosk at the bus stop, you know, alerting them that a mask would be required to ride our public transportation?
Yes, our plan is to have it, the messaging on our website along with our route information on our app. And then we would also put it on any bus stop signs that are at the various stops throughout town.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to have staff discretion on the 5th bus. I like the way they're leaning towards the, you know, the express bus. That seems to make sense to me, but certainly the staff are the ones on the ground and are in the best position to make this call when appropriate. So that would be the way I would lean. And yeah, the mask problem's tough. You know, it's every employee in town has to deal with it, and every employer in town has to deal with it. It's just part of the deal. So it's impressive to hear the amount of protocol you guys have in place and the support for your staff, which is great.
Anything else on buses? Everybody good with this schedule, timeline?
I love the idea of the ramp up. Jennifer, question for you. Is there an opportunity for the trolley to run on Ridge Street?
We talked a little bit about the trolley running on Ridge, and the only reason that we wouldn't recommend that is trolley is one of our smaller buses as far as fitting people inside. So if we were to run another bus, I would recommend another, you know, just another one versus the trolley, if that's something that the council wants to do with that 5th bus instead of a trolley.
It was just a question.
Make sure everybody understands the 5th bus. The 5th bus was proposed to be the trolley on Main Street. That's bus number 5. So, you know, repurposing that route to something else, it could still involve the trolley if we wanted to, but as Jen suggested, we get more bang for our buck using a big bus, especially with the physical distancing requirements. So, you know, we would probably not use the trolley to start off with that. So.
Thank you.
All right, if everybody's good, then what I'm hearing is starting on June 1, we will do the 4-bus system, and we will evaluate daily what we see the need and as it progresses. And if we decide that it's time to pull the trigger on the 5th bus, we'll certainly let you know that we're getting ready to do that. If you have observations and think we need to be looking at something sooner, just get a hold of me and we'll get on it. So it'll be interesting to see how the purple is going to work also, because you'll notice, and Jen looked at all the data, and so that kind of, what was it, 3:30, 3:45, when we're going to kind of switch directions of go from purple A to purple B or whatever. That's kind of when we see those ridership changes, depending on people going home versus coming down to work. So it'll be kind of interesting to watch that. Gary, did you have a comment?
Just a question, Rick. As we hopefully gear up and put more buses on route, any issue of having drivers available or others to support drivers?
No, because I'll remind the council that we got federal funding that allowed, specifically earmarked for transit, to continue to be paying our full-time drivers. So all of our full-time drivers that have continued to stay, we've had, what, 1 or 2 resign during this thing. But they've been collecting a full paycheck this whole time. So they're ready to go. And actually, with the reduced summer schedule, we're equipped to, I don't know, what's it take, Jen? 22 drivers right now or something to run what we have?
Right now, we have 23 drivers, and it takes between 20, you know, just to make sure we have coverage for vacation. So I feel like we are pretty good to have a 5th bus come on.
So, yeah.
Great.
All right. If nothing further on transit, we'll move forward with that. The other thing is you have a memo in there from Shannon Haynes about paid parking. So you probably heard me tell during our community meeting last Friday that we were going to be bringing this back to the council, and every time I've had an opportunity, I've kind of stated that it's important for us to, I feel, implement paid parking back in. It's even more important to manage the reduced number of parking spaces that we have in town. And the only way to do that is through a paid parking program. As you'll see, as you've seen in the memo, Shannon is proposing that while we did have council approval to increase the rates in some of our lots for 2020, we have not implemented those increases, and we're suggesting to you that we do not implement any increases and that we stay with our 2019 rates that we were operating under before, and she has a copy of what those look like. This also includes continuing with our employee parking. So employees would be still primarily East Sawmill and the ability to use Tiger Dredge, which is the Riverwalk Center. We would have a little bit different usage of the Tiger Dredge this summer because we don't have to worry about having it available for, NRO performances in the evening, et cetera. So it gives us, probably a little more public use throughout the course of the summer. Shannon Haynes, what else? Anything we need to remind them of on this parking issue?
We were recommending that previously Wellington was available for employees Monday through Thursday. We would not allow that, because if we're shutting Main Street, then we would expect more people to need to park there, guests. I think other than that, well, I guess one of the other things I would point out is we have heard rumblings from at least one of the lodging properties that they will not be able to valet cars because they're going with more of a touchless system this year. And so they're looking for additional parking. What we've told them is that we don't have any intention of changing our overnight parking and allowing for overnight in other lots that are currently not allowed. So, we're asking them to find other solutions on their own property or for guests to self-park. We're just going to have to keep an eye on that. If we have more guests self-parking, say in the ice rink, we may need to look at that pricing and the number of spaces that are available.
So we know that, right? We know we can have 200 cars from different lodging groups parking in the ice rink, or, well over 100 or 200 cars out on over what we call overnight overflow parking out on Airport Road. So there's a whole email chain going around from some of the lodging that would love to see the town relax our overnight parking on places like Tiger Dredge, F-Lot, Tonopah, right? They'd like to see us allow overnight parking. The challenge is, if you put 100 cars in there that are staying, you put 100 cars from the village in F-Lot overnight for 3 or 4 or 1 week, we have even less parking for our guests. And we've already, our day guests, the people that have already lost several hundred parking spaces in the core of town. So we can't allow overnight cars to be parking in our in-town core lots. That's our feeling. It just doesn't make sense at all. And we still will allow, both at the bookends of town, we'll still allow people to take cars out there and park them overnight.
Everybody good with that?
Yep.
Everybody good with the paid parking as presented?
Yes, without increasing the rates.
I have a question about parking, during the Main Street closure and kind of patrolling those surrounding lots. How are we going to help, daylight the parking in the back of their lot? How are we going to make sure that people aren't parking there and just support them?
So we actually, that particular complex, Jay Beckerman's already reached out, and Matthew, I think, is going to meet with him, or may have met with him today, actually, to go through the lot and see what we could do. That's actually an interesting space because some of those spots actually belong to the town. And so there's a lot we can do. I think we'd be open to helping other businesses as well if they have issues with their private parking lots getting taken over by guests that are not frequenting their business. We do that with some private businesses, and we can certainly work on it with others.
Okay, so they'll be able to establish a plan with somebody. Okay, great.
Yep.
And I would guess a lot of those private businesses are going to be trying to expand their seating space out into their private parking anyway. So
yeah. Other questions? Everybody's good? Okay.
Yep.
There you go. Housing and childcare.
You got two very descriptive memos in there, one on the housing, really talking about our last housing committee meeting, mostly an FYI. I would be remiss if I didn't tell you how extremely proud I am of our staff and their success in getting a 9% LIHTC loan for our, I can never remember the name, whatever, Verde.
It's a Verde, buddy. Come on.
Verde.
The 80 unit complex. It's just, it's one of those things that certainly during this time when it seems like we're struggling so much, that this is really a positive, exciting project. I mean, not only is it a net zero project, I think we have a great partnership with Gorman, and I'm really excited about working with them on this. And it's obvious that Chaffa was excited about this project also. And I think that, to get it on the first go around was a great accomplishment. This allows us to get in. We'll start doing infrastructure work this year so that next spring we're going vertical on that site. But kudos to our whole housing staff, and everybody had a hand in this, but Nicole Rex led the charge from the staff perspective in presenting to Chaffa. And so, kudos to all of them. And I know many of you have reached out and said congratulations, but this is a good deal for us.
Yeah. Rick, well said. And I just add that for the public that's listening, that I was amazed at how competitive that was. And, huge success for our staff to get it. Such a competitive arena.
It's also you guys can also pat yourselves on the back too, because one of the things that made us successful was this town's commitment to housing and our financial contributions. We did some in-kind contributions, obviously, but we also made a $3.5 million commitment as a subsidy to this, which, we were all shocked that it ends up being a loan, right? Nobody's ever said they'll give us the money back later. But it's still, not everybody's in a position that we are, that we can make those kind of commitments. And that goes a long way. And so you guys have led the charge on housing for a number of years. And that's part of what made us successful also. So, and under childcare, so that memo kind of reiterated a lot of stuff. It's kind of hard to be talking about a tax issue 2 years from now, right? But at some point we'll go back to discussing that strategy. I will tell you that there's a housing committee, childcare committee meeting next Wednesday. Kelly is your committee person there. There's a number of issues that they need to talk about. There's some challenges as childcare centers are starting to open up. There's challenges with families being reluctant to go back to the way things were before, and that all equates to funding and funding challenges. And so Kelly will be at the meeting next Wednesday, and then we expect that we're probably going to bring at least one thing back to you on June 9th meeting that we're going to need some council direction on related to childcare, and there may probably be some other information that will be worth sharing after that committee meeting. Is that good, Kelly?
Yeah, I think that's great. I just wanted to say that Corey and the childcare centers have spent a ton of time and effort sort of getting regulations together and trying to make things that are, specific to toddlers that, our two biggest things are wear your masks and stay 6 feet apart. And like both those things for age 3 to 5 are just really difficult to implement. So they have been thinking, dreaming, eating, sleeping, all of this for the last month in order to get open. And I think all of the Breck Child Care facilities are opening June 1. And they have some limited access. Right now, one of the saddest things is that you're not really allowed to have anything soft in any of the rooms for childcare. And so most places aren't opening in the afternoon for the first couple of weeks because, how do you run nap time? How do you let kids bring in loveys from home that are germ ridden? So they've just really been identifying all the things that they can, all the ways they can keep kids outside. And they've been looking for some additional space and, shirts for the baby teachers to change over shirts like all day long, as often as possible. And they're just really working so hard to keep these kiddos as healthy as they can. And of course, hopefully the parents are as respectful as these teachers are, because most likely the kids are going to bring it in from home. So anyway, they've been working very hard. And like Rick said, there's just a ton of parents are all over the board from, I would have sent my kid through this entire closure to I'm not sending my kid until next fall, or I don't know when we're sending again. So it's been really difficult for them to plan and funding wise to make everything work. But they do have plenty of willing teachers, and so they're opening up June 1, and then we'll be, I think, just watching things really closely from there.
Kelly, are they actually talking to the parents and saying, what's your philosophy at home about this stuff? I mean, are they kind of weeding out the parents that might be cavalier about as far as their health concerns?
So there isn't really a weeding out. It's more, there are several different documents that you have to commit, you sign and submit, and you commit that you're following the state public health and county public health orders. So it's really just, I guess, asking the parents to do the best they can and not, trying to determine who's a believer in COVID and who's not, or who's a believer in masks and who's not. So they are making commitments, and then every morning at drop off, the kid and the parent will be temped. Parents aren't allowed to go into the facilities. They'll drop off their kids at outdoor classroom doors. It's everything from like lunch boxes. You can't bring soft lunch boxes into the classroom. They have to be either like plastic wipe down or throwaway. I mean, they've had to think about so much. It makes your head spin. And hopefully the parents will have read all the documentation that keeps getting sent to them and that they're signing. And just, we're all in this together.
I thought Jeffrey was going to tell some anecdotal story about growing up having a brick instead of a lovey, and that's what kids should do today.
Kelly, just Jeffrey threw out the word cavalier.
Cavalier.
Cavalier. So it made me think. in our child care centers, do all the kids have to be up to date on vaccinations, or do we not pay much attention to that as either a town or any of the schools themselves?
Well, we do pay attention, but it is, the same with state policies, which is you have to have up-to-date vaccination and like checkups. But if you decide for personal reasons or for religious reasons or whatever that you're not vaccinating or that you're not getting all vaccinations, that is still up to you. But all the documentation and recordation has to be in the school system.
Okay.
I have a question about, I know we'll be talking about financial next time, but with the half days, how is that working out? Are families being charged for a full day, or are they only paying half day? And then how does that work with tuition?
Yeah, so great question. I mean, these are the questions that that are really still being figured out school by school. We've left it up to the boards so far to figure out exactly how they want to charge their families and how to make it work financially. The difficulty is that if they have less kids coming back and they're going half days and so they charge less, unfortunately, staffing doesn't really change. I mean, you pretty much always have to have 2 teachers in a classroom so that if someone has to go to the bathroom or if one kid is having a problem, the other kid or the other teacher can work with the other kids. And so it's hard, you can't just figure out a way if you have half the kids to have half the teachers. It just doesn't, the numbers just don't work that way. So financially, the schools are just trying to figure out how best to make it work. And we've heard kind of a bunch of different ideas. And I think until the Child Care Committee really knows solidly what each facility is doing, I don't want to get into the specifics of everything. But
go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I mean, we've heard everything. We've heard all options, paying less, paying the same, paying full amount. I will say that it's pretty rare, extremely rare. I haven't heard of really any other facilities, and I'm sure they're out there. I'm not saying we're the only ones, but we suspended payment as soon as our facilities closed. And so that was like March 16th or something. So all the parents were credited the rest of March. They haven't paid April and they haven't paid May. And that's very rare. I mean, most people on the Front Range and in other states have all been paying full price throughout this time, despite not receiving any care. So, I think everybody's just trying to make it work. We, of course, our families are the top priority, but we also have to be able to open these doors in June and stay open in the long term. So there's there's a lot of reviewing of books and trying to make things work going on.
Well, and I wonder if that affects the balance of how many people will come back. Like if people have half the income but they're paying the same amount for childcare, are they less likely to come back because they're better off staying home with their kid? I mean, I'm sure you've thought through all of this. I think it'll be great for the Child Care Committee to take a look at that balance.
Yeah. And that is happening definitely, Erin, especially with older siblings that are home right now because camps are uncertain. But we have told families that if they have more than a 10% change in their financial situation, they can contact Corey and look at getting additional tuition assistance if that works for their family. So, I mean, we have had a lot of families with all kinds of different situations.
Yeah. I just hope that there's a mechanism or that they feel empowered to come to us. I mean, obviously, it's kind of lean and mean here with our budget, but this is crucial. You know what I mean? If we want to open up, we want to get people back to work, and I don't think you can just leave your children at home. So you have to put them somewhere. So yeah, hopefully they'll come to us if it comes to that, because this is This is just a crucial amenity to our town, as important as anything else.
I totally agree, Jeffrey, and I know that council does. I mean, we've all had many discussions and had overwhelming support. I think, you know, what we want to do is encourage all the facilities to be as strong as possible and make really good decisions for them. And then also, you know, step in where it might be appropriate. Because, you know, it's a really difficult time for the town as well, so.
I can't imagine being home with children.
Yeah. I mean, what's really going to be critical is really getting focused on passing a tax in April of 2022. Because, I mean, we've got money in the budget that, you know, so much in the years coming ahead. So if we have to steal a little bit from the future in order to kind of cover some unforeseen additional costs and expenses today, given what we're going through, it's going to be even more imperative that we ensure that we are able to pass a new tax in 2022.
Yeah,
to sort of refill the treasure box.
I couldn't agree more, Gary, and certainly appreciate and agree with your comments, Jeffrey. And the only thing I'll add is we also need to remember to support our directors and support our staff. You know, those guys, it's a big job in today's world. And so, yeah, well said, you guys.
All right, anything else on childcare? All right. Yep, lost my place.
So we don't have any committee reports, Mayor.
Financials?
Let's just, yeah, we can see if council has any questions. Basically, these are your April financials, which are pretty much reflective of what what you get in the month of March, and we had already given you a precursor to our March filing, so none of this should be a surprise, and it's exactly what we expected.
Hey, Rick, I got a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
In your opinion, how much more time needs to go by before you get some sense as to whether we need to move toward tier 2 cuts based upon what we think is happening, is going to happen? How are you thinking about that with Brian and Leslie and the whole financial group?
I'm certainly not waiting for returns. I'm waiting because April returns, and Brian will have early April returns, but let's face it, right? Nothing. May, nothing. So I'm thinking 4 to 6 weeks. I need to start to see what June starts to feel like, right? We're going to get anecdotal information. I can talk to a number of you and to other business people. I can look around and see what's happening. We're going to start to get a feel for what we're seeing in June as we get into July. And I think, I would think mid-July, we're going to have a pretty good idea of what we're going to talk about this every time we get together, meaning staff and with you guys. So what we've been waiting for as we start to, while I don't want to play this up too much, but what we've been waiting for to see what this transition starts to look like is right around the corner for us.
Agreed.
And that's where we're going to start to see as our restaurants start to open, what does that look like? You know, when right now we know you got a maximum of 50 people, which, you know, for some restaurants that's anywhere, 30-40% maybe of what they're allowed to do if they could even seat 50 people. And throwing them a bone and adding another 16 people out on the street isn't going to make a huge difference. So, but how often do they turn those tables? And so what's that equate to? And everything else that we're going to see from a retail standpoint, we'll start to get a good feel for that, I think, as June progresses and even July. And I would ask, Dick and Eric, I mean, you guys are going to feel it and know it on a daily basis, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we'll know pretty quickly, Gary. I think couple of weeks. I mean, the really, it's going to be how quickly the county moves out of this phase to the next phase, or the state, whoever's, we're under state guidelines for restaurants right now. At what point do we go from this 50% or 50 number max to, I don't know, whatever else is next, So, if that keeps up for a while, and, retail has to stay with the 1 person per 100, and we don't get very far this summer, and numbers start to spike pretty badly, and they want to ratchet this back, and we get to fall, and, things go the other way, we'll be in trouble. But maybe it's busy and everything works out all right, and people wear masks like they're supposed to, and everybody does the right thing, and we can start to move along. So.
Yeah, no, I think it's good. The next step is going to be sometime mid-July based upon what we're seeing and the feeling that we're getting. And that will help us make adjustments if necessary for 2020. And then probably a little further on by late summer, will give us a sense of what's happening, and that will start setting up budgets for 2021.
Exactly. Yeah.
Don't spend on spending any money that we don't need to.
Yeah.
And even money we do need to, we're not going to spend. So,
Eric, you hit the nail on the head with this. If people follow the protocol in the short term, I think we can get back quicker in the long term. And it's almost, I'm sure people that are savvy enough to watch this meeting are the ones that are doing everything right. But, try to spread the word. I mean, I still see some lack of, mostly with the young people, lack of social distancing, people, not wearing masks in public places. So, God, if we can just get through this, it's delayed gratification.
Any other questions on financials?
I think Brian is trying to share some information with us, but we can't hear him. But we have preliminary April numbers, and so far we are down 65% for April, which is better than we expected, but don't get too excited. That's, a relatively small month, and we would normally have quite a few locals shopping during April, but still better than the 90% we had included in our previous projections.
Woo.
I think
There's your answer, Gary. We're back. We're back, baby. We're back. Thank you, Leslie. Any other questions on financials, gang? All right, we're gonna move along then and go to Walkable Main Street discussion.
All right, I'm gonna tee this up. It's gonna be Shannon, Mark Truckee, and myself kind of leading you through a little bit of a discussion here. Before I jump into this, because I'm afraid that we're gonna get knee deep into this Main Street discussion, and I'll forget to see if you have any questions about the proposed rec center opening. We sent you a proposal that Scott Reed had obviously spent a lot of time on putting together about, I hope you recall that, a phased approach to the rec center, and all of it is very flexible depending upon obviously what we see from the state and the county. But I want to make sure you guys at least are okay with the way we're proposing this, this kind of soft, gradual opening of our recreational centers.
Yes.
Everybody good?
Thanks, Scott.
Yes, we don't have it. Do we have a date or anything like that yet about rec centers?
So Scott, chime in. We're going to start a reservation system June 15th or what?
17th of June for the rec center and the tennis center. July 1st for the ice rink. And then summer camps will begin on June 8th, and that is confirmed. So the other dates are very much based on what happens with numbers and that kind of stuff and approval from the state. But we are going to begin summer operations in terms of summer camps on June 8th.
Are you staffed for those, Scott?
We are intending to utilize full-time staff for most of our summer camps at this point, but we are definitely skeletal in terms of the staffing.
For what it's worth, I think that with the rec center itself, for us to go slow, if us going slower with the rec center allows for things to go maybe faster with restaurants and retail and that sort of thing. The rec center honestly makes me nervous, and I worry about more cases and spreading it and being a hotspot. And I read the memo. I think it's great. I think, taking every precaution as possible. I think we need to really watch our positive cases. I know we're not doing anything that the CDPH isn't allowing, that sort of thing, but we started out on the conservative side, and I still feel pretty conservative about it. I get, like, with the summer camps, I understand that that's also serves, for childcare and that sort of thing. But for the rec center itself, I feel like that's an amenity, and the ice rink is an amenity that if we could go slow, the better, so that we slow the spread.
Well, I think Scott is being very cautious and rather conservative. So I appreciate that, Aaron. He's going to start going public with these dates, and I wanted to make sure you all heard him and we're okay with this before we start pushing it out, because the public's starting to wonder themselves, what can they look forward to and what's going to happen. And so he'll start pushing this information out to the public. So, all right, thank you. So now let's jump over. You good, Scott? Yeah, okay, fine. Let's start talking about Walkable Main Street. So, we've been working for, it seems like a long time, but I guess it's been a few weeks, and talking about, closing part of Main Street from Watson up to kind of the mid-block, a little beyond the mid-block of 400 South Main Street. There's several. Originally, our purpose for doing this was kind of twofold. Number one, we wanted to create a much bigger area for people to walk around and have an opportunity for physical distancing, because we have relatively narrow sidewalks throughout the historic district. And the other one was to allow for an expansion of space originally for restaurants, because we knew they were going to be reduced in their seating capacity greatly. And so what could we allow for restaurants to expand some of their capacity? And this is what, consistent with what we're hearing from the governor, and really encouraging municipalities to work with their local businesses and to seek creative ways to allow them to expand into parking lots, lawns, different areas depending on that. And so that was the whole purpose behind trying to kind of shut down part of Main Street and create a pedestrian mall type atmosphere with some guidelines and protocols. And so, we come up with a plan that will allow us to, create 340 square foot areas, which would be 10 by 34. We want to make that consistent for businesses, so that there's an equity issue, whether they're in the closed area or outside the closed area. So if the bistro wanted to be able to take over some of their parking and use it for expanded seating, we would work with them to make sure that they only got a similar amount to what we're working with on Main Street. So we kind of have an equity issue, that everybody's dealing with that same expanded amount of space. There's also time limits. We're talking about, opening when they would open in the morning, those that serve breakfast, and also it would close down and be gone by 9 p.m. each day, because we don't want it out there during the dark periods. We talked about running to mid-August, trying to kick it off June 12th, which is a Friday, running to mid-August, but being somewhat flexible on that end date depending on how it's going, or if we felt we even wanted to extend it, kind of a little longer. I think that isn't there a BIFA day, kind of a revised BIFA or something that's coming up like August 23rd or something like that. So there's flexibility on that end. And then we've also come up with protocols for retail, right? The one thing we have decided on is we are not going to allow retail. This is our recommendation. We're not allowing retail to expand out into the street. And retail is fine with this. At least the people representing retail are conveying to us. But we are going to allow retail up, 12 linear feet in front of the business for a rack or a table or something to display merchandise. They can also have a mannequin, and they can also have a signboard that of a certain dimension to help advertise their sales of their goods. Obviously, we want to keep the pedestrian pathway open as much as possible, so we're limiting how much, if any, it could protrude. Some spaces don't have the luxury of having kind of a private area, so we would limit what it protrudes into the public access areas. So we've got a lot of these standards in place. Last Friday, Helen sent out, I think it was Friday, right, Shannon? We sent out our first message to the eligible restaurants, those restaurants with a liquor license and it's about 30, low 30 something eligible restaurants in that closed area, to start to gauge the level of interest on how many people we're going to have an interest, because we have to start the modification of premise license almost immediately. And they have a deadline of tomorrow to let us know. As of a couple hours ago, we have 14 restaurants that have expressed interest. So not quite half, but a considerable amount. We have been met with some resistance, but I would say the majority of the comments that we get seem to be positive, and people think it's a good idea, a good way to test it. There are some people that do not agree with it and have concerns about it. There are some people that are still confused and think it's permanent. But I don't know how to fix that other than keep telling us not.
What are the concerns, Rick?
Well, I think there are people that feel like that we're taking away their ability to have somebody park directly in front of their business. There's people that are concerned that there's an unfair advantage because we're creating kind of almost an event, almost a special event in the closed area, and so people will gravitate to that area and forget about businesses outside the closed area, restaurants up on Ridge Street, restaurants outside the closed area on either the north or south end, and that people will just kind of stay in that special area. We've expressed our desire, our willingness to put signage up to alert people that there are other open businesses in town, alert people up to Main Street, alert people at the south end that Main Street Station, Lacima Mall is, they're within eyesight once you're there, but hopefully that they understand those businesses are open. So those are some of the concerns. And then there's people that just think, that anytime you cut down on parking, we're creating parking issues by losing all that parking on Main Street. Where are these people going to go? We're going to create a overflow or excessive parking in other areas of town where parking is not allowed. So people will start abusing the 2-hour time limit on French Street, for example, and things like that. So those are some of the other complaints. Shannon, what are any other issues that I haven't?
Some access issues. Some folks are concerned.
One person threatened legal action against us because they won't be able to access, the parking at the back of their business, the public parking at the back of their business on Main Street. But I think that's to be said, right? That there will be some, and there could be some unintended consequences that we haven't thought of. Obviously, we've tried to think of most of the stuff. I guess one of the questions that we have to decide sooner than later is there a threshold or a level of comfort with you of that this is the right thing to do and we should continue to proceed forward, and it's worth, or is it a lot of work for a small outcome of people maybe? And yeah, so I'm going to stop right there because there's lots of things we want to tell you, but I've kind of posed a question, and I know I can see some people are ready to jump in or have some other questions right now.
I will just say, just to add on, I am disappointed in the number of restaurants out of the chute that have said they would do it. And I think that's a bit of an issue. If you don't get better buy-in, I mean, this was really a bone to throw to everybody. And if most or half don't want it, I don't know that we want to do this. So
how would we monitor success? Like you were saying, depending on how it's going, we can have it go for 2 months or less or more. I mean,
well,
what is
there's no barometer of success other than if restaurants are kept to 50 people maximum through the majority of the summer, you're going to have a packed town and a not great experience because there will be very few places to go where you can get in. So we'll have and do a bunch of to-go food, do curbside to-go, and it'll all work out in the end. The other issue is if things open up quicker, then maybe it's not necessary. I don't know if there is a barometer of success. It's more of a, when we first came up with this idea, I mentioned it to Joe Neguse at one of our mayor's talks. And after that, a whole bunch of other towns decided that, have also, not because of what I said, but, Neguse thinks it was our idea. So it's sort of funny. But, a lot of other places, including places in, like Ohio, that are closing down blocks and blocks and blocks of streets. The pushback we're getting is probably not unexpected, but I thought there would just be more overall buy-in to doing this than there seems to be.
Eric, what percentage of the restaurants are not interested? It
looks like half. Well, it looks like half have not said anything, and the problem is if you're going to close 4 or 5, 6 blocks and you only have 1 or 2 restaurants per block, I don't think that's not what we're looking for. We're looking to animate this whole thing.
But keep in mind, those are only restaurants with a liquor license, and we haven't reached out. There are a handful of other eating establishments that would that may have an interest in doing that, but maybe you're only adding another 5 or 6 or something like that. I don't know. I would add one more measure. Kelly asked about how do we determine success. For me, success would be that, that we see people walking around in that area. We see people following the rules. I have concern over people's ability to follow the rules. And, you're asking people to keep alcohol confined to an area. They can't move from that area, even back into that business with that alcohol. The only person that can carry alcohol across that threshold is the server. So the people can't go back and forth from, a restaurant. They can't go inside Blue Stag and then walk back out to the seating area. And, are people able to maintain the table settings the way we want them? And do we see that area activated? And that would be what would appear to be a success for me. But
can I just add, I think another piece to consider is how, if there are changes from the state on what restaurants can do, If they're allowed to have more seating inside, some of them may decide it's not worth it to have, 16 people outside. So I think we have to keep in touch with the businesses and see how it's going for them, and then also watch the public health rules.
Do we have a sense, are there some particular blocks that have a bigger buy-in than others? If we wanted to make it a smaller closure?
Well, they're kind of scattered all around, but what we're going to hear is, if we shrink it down, we're going to hear from the people that got on the outside edge, just like the people in 400 South that weren't included the first time. And so there's about, I believe there's 2 or 3 businesses in Town Square Mall, 100 North, that would love to go out in there. There's at least 1 in 400 South. There's, you got Blue Stag, you got Flipside. So what are they, 200 South? From that 100, 200 South probably would be probably the majority, wouldn't you think, Helen? Based on what we're seeing so far, but they are kind of spread out amongst there. I don't think shrinking it is going to be our answer. I think we'll have the same issues and concerns, just a smaller footprint. I don't think it's going to solve any problems.
And then the other option is to just close the street anyway and not allow dining on the street, and just make it a street closure, because the original idea was social distancing and not let anybody put anything out there at all. That includes retail. And there's been pushback from retail too, just so everybody knows. I mean, it's not like, I've talked to all kinds of people, and, I don't know, whatever, people have their ideas for stuff, and it just, there is a lot of people that think that cars need to be in front of their shop. And that's a legitimate, that is a legitimate comment for those businesses. They understand their business better than I do, that's for sure. Is this going to make or break any restaurant? I doubt it. I mean, either they're broken already, or, they'll be able to make it through this.
Yeah, even if you take the business side out of it, if you just do it for the people who are going to the businesses, our locals and visitors, I can't imagine many more people walking down Main Street. Half of the people are wearing masks right now. Half of the people aren't. But to allow for some distance options, I think would be really key for people to feel safe walking around down Main Street. So I think for businesses who buy into it, great. If businesses don't buy into it, then maybe some extra tables and chairs out there would be great for people who have to-go orders and don't want to be in the restaurants and that sort of thing. So I think it was a comfort thing. And yes, of course, this is only temporary. There are lots of reasons why we haven't closed Main Street, and we've studied it and that sort of thing. But for these 6 to 8 weeks, my thought was that primarily it's for people to feel safe walking around.
Rick, as long as we're able to adjust on the fly in every aspect, from restaurant to retail to even where we go from Watson to 400 South Main, as long as you have that ability to adjust as you see things happen or the needs, then I'm still in favor of going with it.
The problem, you can't adjust if you do the table thing. That's where this gets a little tricky, because if we do that, you can't then go in and say, hey, this isn't working. We're going to take this away from you. So, I think what you could potentially do, Dennis, is say, let's close the street. Let's see how that goes. Although you're still going to get pushback from retailers who do not want the street closed. They want the cars in front of them. And then you could just say, hey, look, if this works and there looks like there's a big demand, then maybe we can do tables if the restaurants don't get to open up.
But Eric, the restaurants that aren't interested initially, they can come on board later if they go, hey, this looks like it's working. This is going to help us retain some of the business that we've lost. Yes?
I don't know. I'm afraid it's going to not look great. If you got one restaurant in the middle of a block, okay. I just think it's going to not look great with some retail around it. I think this is an all in, all out sort of thing. Now, you know, remember too, one thing we could do instead of this sort of this really structured place thing is what we were going to do in the rest of town, and that is allow restaurants, if they have some other spaces around them to do, if they were off the main street, they could say, look, I'm going to put some tables out here on my property. Is that okay? And the town would say, yeah. Or for instance, the canteen. Say we don't do this and the canteen instead decides they're going to take 400 square feet of their parking lot and do this there. We would let them do that then. So we could go with that model instead and just on a case-by-case situation, which, you know, is a lot more work for the staff, but say, you know, who wants to put tables somewhere else on their own property if they have it?
That certainly wouldn't do anything for Aaron's impetus is saying that giving them more space. Like granted, we work for the canteen, but
you could
the
still
whole
close Main Street. They're almost like two different discussions then.
Oh, I get you.
So you could still close Main Street if you thought that that was what you wanted to do for the pedestrian experience. And then
And what about just putting like town tables down Main Street so that people have, so if people do to-go orders, they can have a place to sit.
So, and that was a big discussion point also. There's really two things that came with that. One was the liquor issue. So you can't, because currently people are taking liquor to go, but you cannot take your liquor to go and drink it in public, even though people are doing that currently. That is not allowed. And number two, who's sanitizing those tables? Because right now, the sanitization guidelines that restaurants will be under, and retail also that will be under, they're pretty hefty. You know, you have to. So who's going to go and clean those tables?
Could we provide, you know, public wipes for people to clean off their own tables, and then they would know that they're clean. You know, then they wouldn't have to rely on somebody else to do.
Yeah, you know, possibly. I mean, we could, you know, the town could hire somebody to do that, and that, you know, that's definitely, you know, every one of these things is definitely in play. That's for sure. Dick.
You know, great discussion. Eric, I feel like we have enough traction to give it a go. You know, we've always wondered what it would be like to close Main Street. And this is our chance. I think we do it. I'm a fan of the current footprint because I think we need to have enough space to give us things to work with and to have some energy. So I think we have a really talented team, you know, led by a number of folks on the BTO and you know, restaurateurs. There's, you know, it's a great mix, a great team. So I think we, like you're saying, Eric, let's encourage as many restaurants to participate as possible on Main Street, and then just roll with it. It's a tight window for restaurants. For those of you that aren't in the business, you know, this liquor license extension, unless Polis comes in and helps us out, which I thought he did last week, but I'm not sure he did. I don't think he's going to. It doesn't sound like it, but to the state is saying that they are going to approve every single liquor license extension. I from somebody that had a catering company for years and did a lot of these things, they aren't fast. They weren't fast in the past, and I don't know how in the world they're going to do it now. So, you know, unless Polis comes in and pulls the state liquor enforcement division out of it, this is a super tight window for us to get our liquor licenses changed and be able to actually serve in these spaces. So I'm hugely in favor. I know it's not working for everyone, and that's always the case, and it's unfortunate, but I think we have to go with the greater good for town and give this thing a go, empower the committee to animate and to fill in the gaps with using their judgment, and report to us often so we can weigh in, and let's make the most of it.
How are we going to handle the liquor to go?
You know, right now it expires the end of May, so unless Polis extends it, which I suspect he probably will. I don't know for how long. There's a lot of lobbying for him to do that. But right now it's scheduled to expire in a week or so.
Yeah, but are we gonna have people order booze to go, then take it and walk around the street drinking it?
They're doing that already. We have bars on decks on Main Street, which is
it's already happening.
Kind of disappointing.
Actually, moving forward with our plan to expand seating out there probably helps us with the situation more than just sticking a bunch of tables out there for people to go sit at, because at least once a restaurant expands their space out into the street, that restaurant is responsible for that space, and they're responsible to monitor it and clean it and make sure all the things happen with regards to the liquor license. So it actually helps us in that regard.
Let me ask you this, Rick. You mentioned before someone can't take their booze from outside to inside, on the establishment. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay, so I see a scenario. People are sitting down, having, they've ordered a pitcher of beer, they ordered some shots or something, and it starts raining, and they, what are they going to do? They want to go inside and sit down and finish their meal, and what will happen then? I mean, yeah.
Well, that's going to be a challenge, right? Because if we end up with a late afternoon downpour, which we've been known to happen, people are going to grab their drink and go huddle under an overhang. So we got other issues besides alcohol. We've got the physical distancing, all those types of things. The reality is it's going to happen, and they're not going to be able to stop those people from doing it. But I would say is a general rule, they're not going to allow people to migrate back and forth with that. So. This is not a perfect scenario. The state knows it's not a perfect scenario. Everybody's being, we're, as a community, we're being somewhat flexible. We're, to a certain degree, we're probably turning a bit of a blind eye to some of what we know is happening right now that we're being somewhat tolerant of, as long as we're not getting a complaint or somebody's not, creating a problem, because we know that people are getting to-go food and sitting on the edge of the riverbank, right, with their drink and eating their burger or whatever they got. So we know that's happening, but it's one of those things that you just, it's that term that we use in law enforcement called discretion, that you tend to be a little more tolerant if nobody's creating an issue. And there's a lot of stuff going on right now that's dictating all this stuff to happen. So, we haven't gone so far to create, some communities are, kind of loosening their open container rules and allowing more open containers in parks in different areas of town, because some cities have parks close by to their business community. So they want people to be able to go over to a park with their beer and do that stuff. And we haven't really gone there yet with that type of stuff. So.
Yeah, I agree with Rick, what Rick said. Nothing is ever perfect. And I think we've been given an opportunity now, given this very difficult situation we're facing, to experiment a little bit. And recognizing that it may not be fair and equitable to everybody if you're not within that cordoned off area, let's say on Main Street. But nevertheless, I think it's worth a shot. I think it's better than doing nothing. If it turns out to be a bust, well, then we've learned some lessons, that the idea of ever closing Main Street, which people bring up over and over again and over the years, we've been pretty darn clear that will never make sense. And so let's not ever think about it again. And I think it's worth taking a shot on. We may learn some things, and who knows, this may move us to a new normal going forward. I mean, if we find this is successful, we can improve upon it. Who's to say that we may not want to do this again next year or the year after in the summertime, if we can make it work for everybody. So recognizing it's not perfect, I realize some people outside of the cordoned off core probably aren't going to feel, and they probably are right, that they're not having the same opportunities. I just think we gotta go for it. So I would continue to support it.
There will be about $20,000 costs to the town, give or take. So there's equipment we have to buy. There's additional barricades because we're closing off for a permanent, and we have to have some available barricades for other street closures that for emergency that could happen over the course of the summer. Additional barricades, some New Jersey barriers we have to have for the hard closure at each end. A big expense, which honestly I think we need no matter what, is we have to pay for some additional porta potties in the core of town. We're going to start off with 2, and we may expand to 4 because we're going to have a real restroom issue in town. People cannot go in to some restaurants or businesses and continue to ask to use the restroom because they're impacting the capacity of that business. Where people have done this in the past, it's just can't happen. We're going to continue to shut down the Welcome Center restroom for probably the majority of the summer because of the way that thing is configured with the tight stairwell and how people back up in that tight space. So we have to have different, more restrooms available. And in order to clean those on a regular basis, it becomes pricey. And I think it's for 4 of them is $6,000 a month with the cleaning to do that. So
Are these like top end porta potties?
they're ADA type toilets, but they're not the kind with granite countertops like you see in some places. They're a porta potty, but it's the cleaning. It's the additional cleaning that's required, and having somebody there on a regular basis to do that and spray them down and sanitize them. So
what about Rick, what about if we do something like this, added police presence? I mean, these guys they're gonna have to be on foot or on bike, right?
Yeah, and we're not adding additional police officers, but we will. I mean, we have talked to the chief, and he understands that we'll try to have a high presence in that area, but it's always as time permits and as calls permit. But when they're not busy doing other things, we'll have an expectation that they're spending their free time in that area, having a high presence. So.
One more question, and I'm sorry to belabor this. When we're figuring this thing out, if we go ahead with this, I would like to have bicycles allowed. I don't want to have it so that you have to like dismount on your bike and walk. If we had like a speed limit sign 5 miles an hour for bikes, it's just if someone comes in from say the Gold Pan, that area, and they want to just kind of ride slowly to another place, I think having them forced to walk their bicycle, especially if they have like road cleats on and stuff like that, that's kind of an annoyance. What do you guys think of that?
I think it's a problem allowing bikes, in my personal opinion. I mean, you're going to have families, you're going to have kids, you're going to have people not paying attention where they're walking. You're going to have some bicycles. To assume that everybody's going to be on their toes, that's not a bet I would make.
Yeah, I'm with you, Gary.
I agree. It's pedestrians only.
How about
world
alley or to Ridge if you're on a bike so that they can still, right? Because down the alley is considered the bike.
We have proposed it in our rules that Main Street is a dismount area for all the reasons that we've heard. I understand your concerns, but from a safety standpoint, we feel it needs to be a dismount area. people that don't want to go in that area will quickly know the way around it. So they'll just bypass it.
I look forward to wearing Lycra, that's all.
We look forward to seeing you, Jeffrey.
So for the sake of time here, I just want to highlight a couple other things. And I'm hearing from a majority of you, it appears that we're going to continue to march forward, which I think is probably the right thing to do. We spent a lot of time and energy in this thing. I know town of Frisco was having this very same conversation tonight, weighing whether they should close or not close. They weren't getting some of the level of response that they hoped they would get. But what I'm hearing from the town manager right now is it appears they're going to continue forward with closing also. I think it's good that we're both doing that. If one's going to do it, it's good that we're both doing it.
Rick, I think when people hear that the council has decided to go forward, wouldn't surprise me if more restaurants didn't decide to pony up.
And the other thing that I just want to let you know is, at first we were saying that it had to be restaurants only, because keep in mind there's different types of liquor licenses. Right now, the governor has not addressed what he's going to do with tavern or bars, but they were very clear in the communication that came out over the weekend that they are looking to allow a tavern or a bar to create a new business model where they can serve food, and then which would allow them to open. But they didn't describe the process it will take for that to happen. So are they going to require us to submit, some sort of, if a Prey, for instance, wanted to offer food, do they have to create a business arrangement with a licensed restaurant of how they're going to get food delivered there, et cetera? And do we have to present that? That's the details we have to work out. But unless we hear otherwise, we'll continue to follow the state's guidelines and work. If some of these taverns, want the ability to create a business model with food, that seems to be the goal of the governor. So we'll continue to work to see how does that happen here. So they may reserve a spot on Main Street, but they wouldn't necessarily open until we worked out all the details, because their licensing is different than a regular restaurant license. So just so you know, and you may hear from some of those people too going, what about us? But we'll continue to work with them. We'll continue to work with retail. We'll continue to work with the businesses outside of the closure area to make sure that we're trying to accommodate their timelines and stuff. And, some businesses may have Main Street frontage and some businesses may not have space directly in front of their building, and we may put them out the back on the Riverwalk because there's not a space directly in front of their business, and we're not going to stick their 340 square feet directly in front of a neighboring business either, because that's not fair to the neighboring business. So all of those details we're going to work through to the best of our ability. So does anybody have anything else on this?
Just so you guys all know, when you guys make the final decision, I'm not going to vote either way. I mean, I'm not going to vote on this since I can do this with my restaurant. There's also a chance that I won't, because having a restaurant in the basement leads to other challenges for us to get stuff in and out. And we're closing our front regular entryway during this period and using an alternate entry through the tower, which is smaller stairs, in order that we can control the flow to our bathrooms, which everybody thinks are public bathrooms. So, I just want to give everybody what I've been working on, but in the end, you six make the decision, and then I will make a decision for my business depending on that decision, whether we do it or not.
So what vote are you talking about, Eric? The vote for the resolution tonight?
Oh, now the resolution's not the final decision on whether we go forward with tables on Main Street or just close Main Street, or, we're going to need a vote at some point to go forward. I heard from Dick and Gary, but,
Right now,
Well,
we're just talking about keep exploring the options and try to come up with a concept of how to do it, correct?
I think now here's what I had no opportunity for a formal vote. Now is when I expect to either have a majority of you give a thumbs up that says, yes, we're doing it. This is not exploring the concept anymore. It's either yes, we're going to do it, or no, we probably should regroup and do something different. Because it's time now for us to move. We don't have exploring time anymore. So what I'm asking for then, and if Eric feels that he wants to recuse himself from this vote, or, Dick doesn't really have Main Street frontage anywhere. So I just need to know if a majority of you want us to continue with and plan on us closing Main Street and allowing, eligible businesses, restaurants to expand out onto the roadway.
Hey, real quick, Rick, does anyone have an issue with me voting? Tim, or, I mean, Rick's absolutely right. I do not have Main Street frontage, so this isn't in play for me, but I am in the industry.
No, I think you can stay.
I don't have an issue.
No.
Okay.
Rick, I'm in support of going forward with closing Main Street and opening it to restaurants and retail as the committee sees fit.
I second what Dennis said, so I'm in.
All right, so let me just get a thumbs up from all of you that are ready to do it right now.
And thank you to everybody and their hard work on this.
All right, I see 5, and you're not, are you not there, Jeffrey?
Yeah, I'm in.
Okay.
I'm in.
All right, so.
And with the caveat, if this sucks, we can close it before mid-August.
Oh, I tell you what, we can have it done. We can have it gone in a week if it's not working.
Okay.
Yeah, but Rick, in
Let's
fairness,
try to work through the problems first.
but some of these restaurateurs are going to have to spend money for tables and cordon off their areas. Pretty harsh if we say after a week or 10 days or some short period of time, oh, by the way, gather up all your stuff and eat that investment. I mean, I think we've got to be prepared to hang in
Yeah, I'm talking more like a month, Gary, or whatever. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I'm torn on this thing, but
like I say, I mean, it's not perfect. It's not necessarily fair and equitable all the way up and down Main Street, but it's extraordinary times. Let's try some things that are different and see what works and what doesn't work.
Okay.
Yeah, and I agree with Gary. I think we need to give it 6-8 weeks minimum, just because there are going to be things that suck initially that we haven't thought of, and we'll work through them. We'll figure them out. And, it's just going to take some time. So I think we do need to commit to a 6 or 8 week period, personally.
The original idea was to get people out, make it vibrant, and get businesses back on their feet. And that's what I'm in favor of.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the overall activation, and just creating interest. I think there's a lot of interest from people saying, oh, Breck's going to be walkable. I mean, I think that is a really important part of supporting all of our businesses for this summer, is just driving up an additional layer of interest. And then, as Aaron said earlier, helping those people to feel as safe as they can while they're here.
All right. You got enough, Rick? Let us
no.
move on to exec session. What's our, who's going to read?
I am.
All right.
You ready?
Yeah, please.
I move that town council go into executive session pursuant to paragraph 4B of section 246402 CRS relating to conferences with the town attorney for purposes of receiving legal advice on specific legal questions.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. A motion's been made for the town council to go into an executive session pursuant to paragraph 4B, section 246402 CRS related to conferences with the town attorney for purposes of receiving legal advice on specific legal questions. Subject of the executive session involves a confidential discussion with the town attorney concerning legal issues with the potential issuance of certificates of participation to fund the construction of the parking structure on the south gondola lot. Roll call.
Mr. Carlton?
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher,
Yes.
Mr. Bergeron,
Yes.
Kuhn,
Here. Yes.
Yella,
Yes.
Ms. Owens,
Yes.
Mayor Mamula.
Yes. Rick, do we have an invite for a?
So everybody should have a go-to meeting invite. So what you're going to do is log out of this meeting. I will ask the participants. They can stay on this. We will reconvene on this same thing that you're on right now at 7 p.m. for the nightly meeting. So again, you're gonna leave this meeting and then you're gonna log into the go-to meeting that was sent to you. And Jeffrey, you look puzzled, but
When do we have to do that?
right now.
Oh, okay.
You'll leave this meeting, go to go-to meeting,
Okay.
and then when we're done with the go-to meeting, you'll come back to this meeting.
Okay.
Shannon Haynes, could you send me that go-to invite again? I'm not seeing it.
Yes,
Yeah, me-
I will send it to all of you again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon.
Yeah.
Fun, yes.
Welcome back, Dennis. All right, gang. It is 7 o'clock. I'd like to call to order the Town Council regular meeting for May 26th. It is 7 p.m. and you are on Zoom. Let's do roll call first, Helen. Sorry.
Mr. Gallagher,
Here.
Mr. Carlton,
Here?
Mr. Bergeron,
Here.
Ms. Owens, Ms. Owens, maybe?
I'm here. Sorry about that.
Mr. Kuhn,
Here.
Ms. Giello,
Here.
Mayor Mamula.
Yes. All right, before we get going, this is for the public. If you are interested in public comment tonight, here is the routine. Now, if you want to make a comment at the sort of the open mic here at the start, it has to be about something that is not on the agenda. If you want to talk about something that's on the agenda and on the legislative stuff we'll be talking about, you can do that at the time we get to that piece of legislative agenda. You can write your comment in the Q&A function at the bottom of the Zoom screen, and we will read that out loud and enter it into the record. You can write your name and that you would like to speak publicly on either during public comment or on a specific agenda item, and then note the item if you can. You'll be called upon when it's your opportunity to speak, and we'll Zoom you in. If you're on a phone and not on Zoom camera, you hit *9 to indicate your desire to speak, and please do this at the time of the item on the agenda. You'll be called upon when it is your opportunity to speak. And finally, you'll have a strict 2-minute time limit. Shannon Haynes will indicate when you have hit the minute 30 mark and when you reach the 2-minute time limit. We haven't done this yet. This is the first time that we haven't done strictly write-in comments, but we're going to give it a try, and hopefully it won't be too clunky for anybody. So there you have it. With that, we are going to move to the approval of the minutes for the May 12th, 2020 meeting. Is there any objection to what's been presented? Note, minutes stand as presented. We have approval of the agenda, Rick?
We do have a change in the agenda, Mayor. We would like to poll first reading under new business, poll Council Bill number 23, Series 2020, an ordinance amending Chapter 1 of Title 9 of the Breckenridge Town Code, known as the Breckenridge Development Code, concerning amenity clubs. We are going to pull that off of the agenda and replace it with Council Bill number 24, which will be an ordinance imposing a temporary moratorium on the submission, acceptance, processing, and approval of applications for new permits to develop real property in the town that propose the development of an amenity club, declaring an emergency and providing for an immediate effective date of this ordinance.
Easy peasy. All right. With that, then, we move on to communications to council. Anybody out there want to make a communication as a public comment for an item that is not part of the agenda, please do it on the Q&A at this time. And I will give you a moment to do that if you're interested. And Jeffrey, you can't do this. This has to be for the public. And as usual, if you don't feel like doing it at this moment, you can always go to mayor@townofbreckenridge.com, and that actually gets to all of us. The staff gets them and forwards every email that they get on, unless they're super mean, and then they come just to me. All right, no Q&A, so citizens' comment is closed. We move on to continued business. We start with second readings of Council Bills for 2020 series, and we begin with Council Bill number 10, series 2020. This is an ordinance amending Chapter 1 of Title 9 of the Breckenridge Town Code, known as the Town of Breckenridge Development Code, by amending Policy 24 Absolute and Policy 24 Relative concerning housing. Tim?
Actually, Nicole's going to do this one.
Hey, welcome back, Nicole.
Hi. I'll make this quick. We had a really good discussion in the work session. I'm here to present the second reading of the ordinance, Council Bill number 10, that will revise Policy 24 of Chapter 1 of Title 9 concerning housing. This policy is really intended to increase the amount of employee housing that's in our community and help to continue to improve that inventory. We know we need it greatly. So right now, we would like the council to move that they adopt the Council Bill number 10 on second reading, which has been read into the record, provided that Section 13, which we discussed earlier regarding density, on page 16 of the ordinance is deleted, and the subsequent sections, those numbers are changed accordingly. So that means that that whole density section will just go back to what it was before. So if there are no questions, I will let probably Jeffrey take that away.
What? Okay.
Thank you, Nicole. Are there any questions? No. Anyone in the public wish to comment on this motion? There is a comment, but it is not on this. Is there a motion?
I move on second reading, we kind of pass Council Bill number 10, series 2020 in the form that's been read into the record.
Jeffrey, allow me to help because we need to also say, but that Section 13 of the ordinance will be deleted and subsequent sections renumbered.
Tim, I have the actual language that has been sent out. If Jeffrey would allow me, I would do that because I've got it right in front of me.
Eric, would be okay if I deputize Double G?
Go right ahead, Double G.
Right, yeah.
I move that the Town Council adopt on second reading Council Bill number 10, the title of which has been read into the record, provided that Section 13 on page 16 of the ordinance be deleted and that the subsequent sections of the ordinance be renumbered accordingly.
Thank you, Gary. There is a motion and a second. Any discussion? No. Roll call, please, Helen.
Ms. Giello,
Yes.
Mr. Carlton,
Yes.
Mr. Kuhn,
Yes.
Ms. Owens,
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher,
My thanks to Mr. Bergeron for allowing me to assist. Yes.
Mr. Bergeron,
Yes.
Mayor Mamula.
Yes. We have a second reading of Council Bill number 17, series 2020, an ordinance amending section 12-4-23, the Breckenridge Town Code concerning the water system maintenance fee.
That's me. This ordinance comes on tonight for second reading. It does amend the part of the town's water ordinance with respect to the water system maintenance fee. It will go into effect on July 1. It will raise the fee from $8 to $12 each billing cycle.
Thank you.
There are no changes, Eric, from first reading.
Thank you very much. Any questions for staff? No. Anyone in the public wish to comment on the water service maintenance fee change? There are no Q&As. Is there a motion?
On second reading, I move we pass Council Bill number 17, 2020, the title which has been read into the record.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? No. Roll call, please, Helen.
Mr. Gallagher,
Yes.
Ms. Giello,
Yes.
Ms. Owens,
Yes.
Mr. Carlton,
Yes.
Mr. Kuhn,
Yes.
Mr. Bergeron,
Yes.
Mayor Mamula.
Yes. We have Council Bill number 18, Series 2020. This is an ordinance amending Chapter 12 of Title 9, the Breckenridge Town Code concerning overhead walkway lighting. Julia?
Good evening, Mayor and Town Council. The ordinance for second reading before you would, if approved, add a new category to our Chapter 12 exterior lighting code in the development code of the town code, sorry. And this new category would allow for there to be public overhead walkway lighting with some limitations with related to the Kelvin, which is the temperature, and the lumen, which is the brightness in public walkways. The width maximum would be 32 feet as proposed. And we did have some changes since the work session, which you should have received that copy. We have removed the Class D requirement since it would just be for public property that would then go through the town project process. And we have also added the wording for facilitating safe pedestrian traffic as the purpose for the overhead lighting category. And those are the two changes we made. I do want to point out that it's going to be for public property only and would not be applicable, therefore, to private walkways.
Thank you, Julia. Any questions for staff? Jeffrey, I'm assuming you want to do this in the form that was presented this afternoon as an amendment to what was in the packet?
Yeah, I wanted to bring that up to Tim Barry, but yes.
Anyone in the public wish to comment on this via the Q&A at the bottom of your screen? No? Is there a motion?
I move we pass on second reading Council Bill number 18, Series 2020, in the form that was discussed during the work session.
Is there a second?
Eric, let me clarify. It's actually the form of the ordinance that was revised after the work session.
Can I start over?
Please.
Helen will get it down correctly.
Okay.
All you need. I still need a second.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Nope. Roll call.
Mr. Kuhn,
Yes.
Mr. Carlton,
Yes.
Ms. Owens,
Yes.
Mr. Bergeron,
Yes.
Ms. Giello. Did we get a Ms. Giello?
She's muted.
Sorry about that. Yes. Can you hear me now?
Okay. Yep. Mr. Gallagher,
Yes.
Mayor Mamula.
Yes. Thank you. We have Council Bill number 19, Series 2020. This is an ordinance concerning the penalty for violating Chapter 8, Title 5 of the Breckenridge Town Code concerning noise.
Mayor and Council, the last time Judge Allen was in front of you, he mentioned that he thought it would be helpful for the town to amend the noise ordinance so that a violation of the ordinance is treated as a civil matter, not a criminal matter. Matters that are criminal can carry a potential jail time in addition to fine, and they also entitle the defendant to a jury trial. This ordinance, if adopted on second reading, would amend the town's noise ordinance to make a violation a civil infraction, punishable only by a fine. There are no changes to the ordinance from first reading.
Thank you, Tim. Any questions for staff? No? Anyone in the public wish to comment via the Q&A? Rick told me I had to wait 30 seconds, just so you wonder what I'm doing.
Sometimes it takes people a while to respond in, so we want to make sure we're giving them.
Oh, no, I totally agree. I'm with you, man.
And there's been no changes to this motion from the first one.
No, thanks for pointing that out.
Okay.
All right, is there a motion?
I move we pass on second reading Council Bill number 19, Series 2020, the title which has been read into the record.
Second.
There is a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Carlton,
Yes.
Ms. Owens,
Yes.
Mr. Kuhn,
Yes.
Mr. Bergeron,
Yes.
Ms. Giello,
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher,
Yes.
Mayor Mamula.
Yes. All right, we have Council Bill number 20, Series 2020. This is an ordinance amending Chapter 14 of Title 9 of the Breckenridge Town Code concerning town projects. Tim?
Thank you, Eric. The town several years ago adopted a separate procedure for the review and approval of the town's own development projects. That term is called a town project under the town's ordinance. This ordinance would amend the town project ordinance to provide that public notice is to be given in the same way that a Class A development permit public hearing is noticed, which is noticed to landowners within 300 feet of the property site, both with respect to the Planning Commission's review hearing on a town project and the town council's actual hearing on the approval of a town project. There are no changes from first reading.
Thank you, Tim. Any questions for staff? Anyone in the public wish to comment on this first reading?
Second reading.
Second reading.
Oh, second reading, sorry, second reading. I'm waiting for my clock to get ready for 30 seconds. Q&A at the bottom, you have 30 seconds to respond. It's a long time to stare at each other.
Yeah. I just been looking at myself in the camera.
Oh, no, you can tell that.
Yeah.
I think we need the Jeopardy music.
Yeah, exactly.
The next one. All right. No public comment is closed. Is there a motion?
On second reading, I move we pass Council Bill number 20, Series 2020, the title which has been read into the record.
Second.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? No? Roll call, please.
Mr. Kuhn,
Yes.
Ms. Owens,
Yes.
Mr. Bergeron,
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher,
Yes.
Ms. Giello,
Yes.
Mr. Carlton,
Yes.
Mayor Mamula.
Yes. All right, we have first reading of Council Bill number 21, Series 2020, an ordinance authorizing the financing of the construction of certain public improvements and the refinancing of certain outstanding obligations of the town, authorizing the execution and delivery of amendments to a site lease and lease purchase agreement, and approval of certain other documents and matters related thereto, authorizing officials of the town to take action necessary thereto, and declaring an emergency.
Eric, this ordinance actually is drafted as an emergency ordinance. So if it's adopted by the council tonight, there will only be one reading. There won't be a second reading. This ordinance, if approved, would authorize the town to issue its certificates of participation for the purposes of paying part of the cost of the town's broadband project, paying for the construction of the new parking structure on the South Gondola lot, and paying off and refinancing the current balance of the town's 2007 certificates of participation. My memo is in the agenda packet. Council had a nice discussion about this ordinance this afternoon. I don't really have anything to add to my memo. Perhaps Mr. Holman has things he would like to add, though.
That a no?
No, I'm good.
All right. Any questions for staff? Anyone in the public wish to comment on this this emergency ordinance reading?
Eric, we need to put it on the record, make sure council is aware that as an emergency ordinance, under the town's charter, it requires the affirmative vote of 5 council members at least. And if it's adopted as an emergency ordinance, there will be no second reading. It will become effective tonight and will allow us to move forward on these COPs soon.
Thank you, Tim. All right, and there are no public comments, so public comment is closed. Is there a motion?
On first reading, I move we pass Council Bill number 21, Series 2020, the title which has been read into the record.
Jeffrey, I'm sorry, forgive me for interrupting. This is an emergency ordinance. There is not a first reading.
Oh.
And it's important that the motion say you adopt the ordinance as an emergency ordinance.
Okay, can I start over?
Yes, please.
As an emergency ordinance, I move we pass Council Bill number 21, the title which has been, Series 2020, the title which has been read into the record.
Thank you.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Bergeron,
Yes.
Mr. Carlton,
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher,
Yes.
Ms. Giello,
Yes.
Mr. Kuhn,
Yes.
Ms. Owens,
Yes.
Mayor Mamula.
Yes. I heard one no in there somewhere.
Yeah.
All right, we have first reading of Council Bill number 22, Series 2020, an ordinance repealing and readopting with changes policy 33 relative of section 9-1-19 of the Breckenridge Development Code concerning energy conservation. Mark.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This ordinance in front of you would amend the Development Code, policy 33R regarding energy conservation. Recently, the council has taken action to adopt the 2018 building code and the energy codes related to that, as well as an updated sustainable building code. As a result of that, some of the things that are now requirements in those building codes, we previously gave positive points for, such as getting a home energy rating for residents. So we're proposing to take those positive points away at this point because they're already required now. We have gone in several areas and identified spots where additional positive points could be earned by exceeding 10 to 19% energy efficiency on a project beyond what's already required. And also by installing electric vehicle stations, chargers. And then we made a few modifications to some of the point assignments for use of outdoor energy, such as heated outdoor spaces on plazas and pools and hot tubs.
Thank you, Mark. Any questions for staff? Now, anyone in the public wish to comment on this council bill? Just use the Q&A function at the bottom of the Zoom if you'd like. And with that, public comment is closed. Is there a motion?
First reading, I move we pass Council Bill number 22, Series 2020, the title which has been read into the record.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there discussion? Roll call, please.
Ms. Owens,
Yes.
Mr. Kuhn,
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher,
Yes.
Mr. Bergeron,
Yes.
Ms. Giello,
Yes.
Mr. Carlton,
Yes.
Mayor Mamula.
Yes. We're now going to pull ordinance number 23, which was scheduled for first reading, and in its place add Council Bill number 24. This is an emergency ordinance imposing a temporary moratorium on the submission, acceptance, processing, and approval of applications for new permits to develop real property in the town that propose the development of an amenity club, declaring an emergency and providing for an immediate effective date of this ordinance. Tim? Or
Mayor
Mark?
and Council, this ordinance was generated as a result of the council's discussion of the proposed Council Bill 23 at the work session dealing with amenity clubs. This ordinance, if approved tonight, would impose a 6-month moratorium on the submission of any development permit application that would include a proposed amenity club, and would also prohibit the Planning Commission from approving such an application during the 6-month moratorium period. I want to point out that this ordinance does contain a definition of amenity club that was taken out of the draft amenity club ordinance, Council Bill 23, that has now been tabled. And it is possible that in the next 6 months, as the staff works through the issue of how to recommend to the council what we should do about amenity clubs, the definition of amenity club may change. But I thought for the ordinance, we needed to have something so that people would understand what we're trying to impose a moratorium on. But I did want to mention that that could be changed.
Excellent. Thank you, Tim. Are there any questions for staff? Is there anyone in the public that would wish to comment on this moratorium done as an emergency tonight?
Maybe you can do your Building Hope plug.
As an aside, any mental struggles right now or during this troubling COVID time, Building Hope is a wonderful resource for the community. You can get to them at buildinghopesummit.org and get some telehelp. It's a tough time for everybody, and not everybody has an outlet. So buildinghope.org. And that's the end of the public comment. Nobody commented, so we are going to move on with the motion. Jeffrey?
As an emergency ordinance, I move we pass Council Bill number 24, Series 2020, the title of which has been read into the record.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion?
That's a good motion.
It was.
Thanks.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Kuhn,
Yes.
Miss Owens,
Yes.
Mr. Bergeron,
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher,
Yes.
Miss Giello,
Yes.
Mr. Carlton,
Yes.
Mayor Mamula.
Yes. Tim, for this next resolution, I feel like I should abstain, having a potential direct fiduciary possible benefit from having Main Street closed with a significant share in a restaurant on Main Street. Can I introduce the matter and then step away, or what would you like me to do?
No, you can go ahead and introduce it. Eric, keep in mind that the issue of a conflict of interest under the town's charter is a determination made by the council as a whole, not you individually.
Okay.
So I think we need to make sure that the council agrees, even though you believe you have a conflict. I think the council ought to find that you do have a conflict and then allow you to read the title and then leave the meeting or just not participate.
Very good. How does the council feel about what I feel is a conflict?
If you feel it's a conflict, I will support the fact that you may have a conflict and move that you recuse yourself from this particular resolution.
Eric, I respect your decision.
I agree with Gary.
I agree with the comments so far.
Me as well.
I agree as well, but if you recuse yourself, who would run this?
That'd be you, buddy.
You.
I'm gonna this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna hold up my cheat sheet for you. Is that backwards? It is. Oh well. That's my cheat sheet. Yep, that doesn't work.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
All right, let me introduce this and then you can take it from there, Jeffrey. This is a resolution number 14, series 2020, a resolution concerning the temporary closure of portions of North Main Street and South Main Street.
Oh, also, Maureen Nichols would like to make a comment.
I believe that's my job.
Sorry, Jeffrey. I knew that you saw that. I just wanted to make sure.
Maureen Nichols would like to make a comment.
Do staff report first?
Yeah, I think let's do the new staff report first, and then we'll deal with the comments and other things coming up. Does anyone want to do a staff report?
Oh,
I'm not sure who's going to do the staff
I
report.
can do it. I can do it. It's always tricky when I'm trying to take minutes on myself. Mayor and council, this resolution would allow for the temporary closure of Main Street for additional social distancing as required by state and local health departments due to the COVID-19 pandemic. It also gives the town manager the ability to determine which businesses could potentially expand onto the street, the time frame and boundaries of the closure, and the terms and conditions of it as well.
Okay, so what we're going to be doing is we're going to kind of move forward with this. We're going to throw it to the staff and try to get them to come up with the best schematic to implement this. Does anyone on the council have anything to say, an opinion or something that they want to voice? Nobody?
So Jeffrey, the way that you'll ask for public comments, we know we have one public comment. I believe that we're going to move that person in as a panelist to allow them to speak to the council.
Okay.
We'll remind them that there will be a 2-minute time limit on that. And then we'll see if we get any other comments while that is going on. So if you want to, you're going to go ahead and ask for public comments, and then we'll recognize Maureen Nichols and bring her into it.
All right, we're asking for public comment, and we're going to recognize Maureen Nichols and to bring her in to give her public comment.
Hey, Jeffrey, I sent you my cheat sheet over your messages, just so you have it.
Okay, thanks.
Maureen, you can speak now.
Okay. I have been a long time resident of Breckenridge, over 55 years. I know how crowded my block is on Ridge Street because I'm across the street from the post office and a liquor store and a grocery store. And it's very crowded. And I'm concerned about, if closing Main Street, where are people going to park? Where are they going to drive? And I do know that in Grand Junction, they closed their Main Street for a couple blocks. This is a number of years ago. And people were, the town residents, people were very unhappy because people do like to drive through a town and look at everything. Maybe they're just going through town and going to climb Quandary Mountain, but they're going to be coming back. And a lot of them, after they've seen the Main Street, they like to stop and walk around. But if they don't get to see the Main Street, which they won't, then that's a lot of people that don't get to see Main Street. They will be on Park Avenue on Highway 9. And the two streets that are very busy are Ridge Street and French Street. And there's constant traffic on those two streets. And I think that's where a lot of people will go. I also would say that if you've ever been to Salida to eat, the restaurants have built wooden tables. Okay, I have to stop.
Yes, your time is up.
Check out Salida. It's a neat way to have traffic and also have restaurants outside.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Maureen. And we will take that certainly into consideration. Are there any other public comments?
Jeffrey, we had one other comment that was posted as a question. So I'm just going to read it since it came in during this public comment time. And it was from Carol asking, how can you take away property rights without compensation? And just so council knows, we've asked Carol to schedule a time to meet with staff to discuss.
Okay. Any discussion on this?
Well, just a comment, you know, in reference to what Maureen said, I think that we do all agree that in normal times we wouldn't be closing down Main Street, but because of the environment right now with COVID, to allow for people to be on Main Street safely and allow for distance and or outside dining, that's why we're doing it. And it's for 8 weeks. It is temporary. It's not a permanent thing.
Anybody else? I will just say this. I think of all of us, I was probably as reluctant as anyone on this, but I think this is special times, and Dennis phrased it well, if not now, when. Granted, this is it's going to be an experiment, but we threw a lot of thought into this, and I think I go along with the council. I agree with the council, the sentiment expressed at the work session. I think this could be something that gets us back on better footing for our small businesses and our employees. So I will, does somebody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we pass resolution number 14, series 2020, the title of which has been read into the record.
Second. Is there any discussion? All right, a motion has been made and seconded for resolution, a resolution number 14, series 2020, concerning the temporary closure of portions of Main Street and South Main Street. Let's do a roll call.
Mr. Kuhn,
Yes.
Mr. Carlton,
Yes.
Ms. Owens,
Yes.
Ms. Giello,
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Bergeron.
Yes. Okay, a motion has been made and passed.
You do, man. You're good.
Okay.
Thanks for covering me, buddy.
Oof.
Well
How'd I do?
You did great.
Thanks.
Sorry to throw it at you like that. That was sort of mean. I should have said something earlier.
I should have been
Sort of thought of it as we were working there. So, all right. Any no other matters there? Planning Commission decisions. Anybody have any call-ups for the May 12th Planning Commission meeting? Nope. Planning Commission decisions stand as presented. Report of the town manager and staff, Rick.
Nothing additional.
Report of the mayor and council members. I have had numerous county meetings. I'm sure you all know that the variance was denied after a lot of talk about it, but things are so in flux right now, as all of you know. We'll see what happens. I think Shannon gave a pretty good layout of what's going on with lodging and short-term lodging and second homes. So we'll just stick with that. Anyone else? Anything they've been to, BOSAC or BHA or?
I have a BOSAC report.
What was that, Aaron?
I have a BOSAC report.
Go to it.
For, we had BOSAC meeting last Monday. The crews have started this week in preparation for the summer season. There are lots of downed trees and they expanded the B&B parking lot or start working on it.
Yeah,
What was that?
He said it looks good. It's big.
Good. The Friends of Rec Trails had their first event scheduled in July, and they will adapt for COVID if necessary. The Swan River Restoration, the annual BOCC updated on Tuesday at 10 a.m. via virtual conference. So that's today. Sorry, I read that. That's from today. The fairy forest, we had another vote to remove it and not move it to anywhere else in Breckenridge because it is not in line with the leave no trace philosophy of the open trails policies. We had this big presentation about Cucumber Gulch Preserve from the 2019 reports. That was from Ecometrics, and they provided a thorough update on the fen mapping, which included wetlands scorecards, the beavers. The numbers have dwindled with 2 active lodges. There are still 2 boreal toads, and they also looked at the sediment. And they talked about how a vast amount of the sediment was from the ski area. And then we talked about some events that could happen in the Cucumber Gulch that would be a problem, like a large storm event, water event, or a fire, especially during a dry year, could be a threat to the Cucumber Gulch. And then staff is working with Ecometrics to develop an updated conservation plan that identifies adaptive management strategies to maintain the biodiversity of the preserve.
Thank you, Erin. That's great. All those years, Jeffrey, you fought for the fairy forest and she buried it in her first meeting. It's crazy.
Like Broomhilda.
Anyone else? Any other groups?
Yeah, I would like to congratulate the BHA. They pulled off the very first virtual Memorial Day commemoration yesterday, and it was well received. It was well attended. My congratulations to Larissa and her staff, and to our own Dick Carlton for a job well done. So, way to go,
Dick.
Way to go, Dick.
Well done. Well done.
I second what Dennis said. It was incredibly well organized. Those 2 ladies killed it.
That's awesome. Any other council reports? All right. How about other matters? Any other matters? Dick?
I've had a few people thank us for the senior parade last Thursday. You know, and really shout out to Chief Baird and Lynn Herford and his whole team for the incredible job. Shannon Haynes, amazing, tons of work, and Public Works I know was very busy with it, and the whole attitude of our town staff of just sure we can do it, and the can-do attitude. It was an enormous success and very, very much appreciated by the kids and families. So thanks to all. Sorry I haven't mentioned all the names of the people that put a lot of work into it, but it came off in 10 days or so, incredibly last minute, and job well done. Thank you.
Thanks, Dick. Any other matters? Jeffrey?
Yeah, I would wonder what you guys and gals feel about having some signage at some of our more popular trailheads. Like Erin was saying, the B&B trail parking lot now, it could house Cirque du Soleil. Some of these other big trailheads, I had a citizen ask me if there's any interest in just putting up a sign at the trailheads on the trail, try to maintain social distancing. I'm not a big proponent of exercising with a mask on unless I'm real close to somebody, but that's just a reminder, while you're conjugating at the trailhead, give everybody some space.
Yeah, will Erin take that to BOSAC?
I can take it to BOSAC, yeah.
Okay. Other matters? All right, I have one. Do you all remember the bike full tower that we used during the bike races?
Yeah.
Well, it's been sitting over in the town's storage facility that I ride my bike through pretty often. And today when I went through there, the staff was moving it again. And one of them said, do you know if we're ever going to use this? And I thought, there's no reason that shouldn't be somewhere in town as a permanent exhibit. I know that for me, it'd be great where Paley is, but I'm sure we could find somewhere else. So I don't know if that's something that the council's interested in, having Matt Neufeld reach out to the proper people and find it a permanent home. The thing still looks great, but it's just, it's sitting there in two pieces in our storage lot next to a busted up bus and a bunch of other just stuff. So.
Yeah, I think it's great.
Sure, Rick would like to work with the Public Arts Commission and have them review that and evaluate that.
Yeah, can you carry that message forward, Gary, or is that something for Rick to do?
Oh, I said Rick would.
Oh, you said Rick. Okay. All right.
There's plenty of room at the new B&B parking lot for it.
Oh, you know what? That's true.
Yeah.
Which parking lot?
The B&B. Have you been there? It's huge.
Huge. We can put the new structure there. All right. Well, any other matters? Any scheduled meetings anybody needs to talk about?
Just a quick question. Do you think, when are we going to be all together again?
I don't know, Jeffrey. I have no idea.
Okay.
So that question is actually floating around under the manager's listserv right now, wondering what people would do. It sounds like Frisco talked that they may start to do it in June. I would say there's still things that we want to work through, and June might be early. That we probably tentatively be better off kind of targeting July and looking at that. I think we still have to look about how we allow public communication, how we control public access to limit the number of people that could show up, if any. And so there's some things we've got to talk through and see what the best practice is going to be for that. So I think for the time being, while it's frustrating, what we're doing now is working for us. So I think we want to see how this is going to kind of sort itself out.
We could do it at the Riverwalk Center. A lot of room in there. We sell tickets.
Although we are having more engagement now than we ever have or will inside town hall. So I think this is working great for the time.
And it doesn't mean we couldn't still Zoom it though, even if we were together, right?
That's true. To have, so if we are limited in how many people are in the room, yeah, absolutely.
And that's the hybrid I think that's the hybrid we want to explore. Do we get council in the same room, but we still Zoom it because we're not allowing public access because we can't control that number? So we would still have to have some form of public engagement, and that would be via Zoom. And that's what we want to see how that's going to be handled. So if you guys are okay, the next meeting will be June 9th. We're going to plan on, certainly that meeting will still be this process, and then we'll probably have a lot more information after that.
Going forward, I think there's a lot of meetings that we have, in particular Rick, and then, to a lesser extent myself, that are traveling meetings that really, I think we should Zoom a lot of these mayor and manager meetings are just not long enough to drive all the way over to Dillon for breakfast and then come back. So be all right with keeping some of these meetings Zoom all the time. Anything else? All right, great job, gang. I appreciate everybody's attention. Thank you to the public that took some time out of their day to do this. And as always, thank you very much to the staff for the hard work during the pandemic. This is a crisis for everybody, and we really appreciate everything everybody is doing. So have a great evening, and talk to you guys later.
Yeah. Peace out.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.